Chapter 678. A holy light that seemed to pierce through the sky penetrated the wall of the Lion King's bedroom, and it lasted for a long time. After a while, the beam of holy light was retracted, and a large hole appeared on the wall of the Lion King's bedroom. Wyrm and Tristan, who were guarding the holy city, were also attracted by the holy light. "My king, are you all right?" Wyrm stood respectfully outside the bedroom and greeted the Lion King, who was in the bedroom. Tristan stood behind Wyrm and respectfully stood without saying a word. Even though they knew something was wrong in the bedroom, without the Lion King's order, they could not and did not dare to barge in. "I'm fine. The Villo has just returned. I was a little excited and had a little competition with the Villo. You can leave now." Artoria's mature and convincing voice came from the bedroom. "I see. The Villo has returned. Since the Villo is here, we will leave now." When Wyrm said this, his voice was a little reluctant, but because it was the king's order, Wyrm obeyed. "How sad. I will leave now." Tristan, who did not say a word, said this at the end. After that, Wyrm and Tristan left. In the room, Artoria was sitting on a throne with her legs crossed. Guinevere was sitting on the edge of the bed without saying a word. Wyrm, he was now leaning on the wall with a large hole in it. "Lily, are you really going to kill me?" After using his spirit sense to detect that Wyrm and Tristan had left, Wyrm immediately spoke. "If you can die from that attack, it only proves that you are too weak," Artoria said seriously without any intention of apologizing. On the other hand, Guinevere, who was watching from the side, pouted. "It's all because the Villo is not romantic." Wyrm was speechless. "Well, it is indeed my fault. Putting aside the fact that two women were fighting for your affection, if you suddenly got angry and said, 'It's okay, you can continue,' when they were frightened, anyone would be angry." Even Guinevere, who had always been obedient to Wyrm, was slightly dissatisfied this time, let alone Artoria. Although it seemed that Artoria was going to abandon her worldly values and be with Wyrm, she was still the Lion King. She was the one who gave the order to the Knights of the Round Table to kill each other. She was the one who led the knights who had completely turned into the Lion King, defeated the arrogant Lionheart, built the new holy city, and carried out the cruel and inhumane saint selection. Thinking of this, Wyrm's expression became serious. "I apologize for my rudeness. Now let's get down to business, Lily." After all, Wyrm was here to find Artoria. Artoria nodded nonchalantly. Whether it was as her lover or as her subject, Wyrm had the right to negotiate with her. However, Guinevere, who heard Wyrm's serious tone, panicked a little. Through the conversation with Wyrm, she knew that Wyrm was not here to join the Lion King. He was here to cause trouble. Whether it was Artoria or Wyrm, both of them were extremely important to Guinevere. One was husband and wife on the surface, but in private they were best friends. The other was her knight and her lover, so Guinevere did not want to have a conflict between the two. However, whether it was Artoria, Wyrm, or Guinevere, she knew that since things had developed to this point, the two of them could not solve the problem without talking. Do you want me to prepare some refreshments?" Guinevere asked hesitantly. Artoria didn't say anything, nor did she move. Wyrm nodded. "Go and remember to prepare more." However, after hearing Wyrm's reminder, Guinevere could not help but smile. Why should he prepare more? It was because there was not enough to eat. As for why there was not enough to eat, Guinevere glanced at Artoria, who was unperturbed and smiled happily. After all, Wyrm's words gave Guinevere another meaning, which was that they could not fight. Preparing more refreshments was for them to eat slowly. If they fought, they would not be able to eat anymore. Guinevere nodded with a smile, got up gracefully and left the room. Seeing Guinevere leave in a good mood, Wyrm let out a sigh of relief. He purposely gave Guinevere the feeling that they could not fight. After all, this could not only take care of Guinevere's feelings, but also find a reason to make Guinevere leave. After all, Wyrm did not have to fight because he did not want to. Wyrm took a deep look at Artoria. He looked at her eyes that were glowing for some unknown reason. Although Artoria was still the familiar one, Wyrm knew that the Artoria in front of him was a familiar stranger. She was not the familiar King Arthur, but the unfamiliar Lion King. Perhaps in the past, King Arthur would choose to listen to Wyrm, but facing this Lion King, Wyrm felt that she would not listen to him. Lily, although you have changed a lot, after what happened just now, I feel that you are still the same Lily. Artoria did not move. Only her glowing eyes flickered. She then looked at Wyrm. You too. Although I don't know how many years you have lived, you have not changed at all. You are still the one who pledged to marry me. However, Artoria's words made Wyrm feel a little helpless. Don't make it sound so ambiguous. Wyrm and Artoria just made a promise that one would be the king for life, and the other would be the king's knight for life. Wyrm suppressed the ridicule in his heart and pointed out the window. Then, can you tell me why you want to carry out the holy purification? And what is with those huge craters outside the holy city? Looking at Wyrm's serious face and hearing his questioning tone, Artoria's expression did not change at all. She was still so calm, as if there was no emotion. I think you should have seen that those craters were caused by my holy lance. Because those are the enemies of the holy city, they need to be annihilated. Artoria did not stop and continued. The reason why I carried out the holy purification is because it is the best way to save mankind at the moment. Chapter 679. Artoria pointed at the part of the wall behind Wyrm that was missing, because of the Holy Lance's attack. Because they were on top of the Holy City's tower, Wyrm and Artoria could see the edge of the world from where they were standing. You should have noticed it as well, right? The edge of this world is constantly shrinking. In the end, the entire world will collapse. The best solution right now is to store humans with pure hearts into my holy spear. Only then can we ensure the existence and continuation of humanity. Then, why don't you cooperate with Chaldea? They have the ability to save this era. If it were you, you wouldn't hesitate to cooperate with them, right? Wyrm asked in confusion. However, Artoria shook her head. They came too late. I can't leave the fate of the human race in their hands. If I did nothing but wait for their arrival, and if they deliberately got entangled in the first few months, this era would collapse, and the human race would be completely hopeless. Therefore I made my choice. Moreover, the one who holds the Holy Grail is the king of the desert in the west. From the moment I arrived in this world, I knew that he had the temple as a defense. I couldn't take him down before this era collapsed. Therefore, I chose to have a truce with him and take another path to save the human race, which is to carry out the Holy Ascension. But you abandon the other people of this era. Wyrm retorted instantly, and his tone was a little angry. And the humans you collected will become specimens. That can't be called the continuation of the human race at all. Wyrm clenched his fist and slammed it on the wall behind him. A part of the wall that was already broken and disappeared was damaged again. Another part of the wall broke and fell down the tower. After that, Wyrm walked in front of Artoria and looked at the goddess-like beauty. You have been affected by the Holy Lance for a long time. You are no longer a human, and you are no longer a specter. You have become a god, that I don't like. You have been assimilated by the Holy Lance, Lungaminiad. Lungaminiad, the goddess. Artoria's eyes flickered slightly. Although it disappeared quickly, Wyrm still caught it. When Wyrm saw Artoria, he noticed that his half-godslayer soul reacted to her. This meant that Artoria had become a god. The only way Wyrm could imagine Artoria becoming a god was to be assimilated by Lungaminiad. After all, it was an anchor that connected the two sides of the world. It would be fine if someone like Wyrm had it, but if it was just a king with the red dragon bloodline, he would inevitably be assimilated. Wyrm even felt some regret. He regretted that he did not add his blood into Artoria when Merlin, King User, and the others created her. Putting aside the fact that King Arthur had Artoria's bloodline, at the very least, Artoria wouldn't be assimilated by the Holy Spear to such an extent. If it were you in the past, you would have tried to find a way to get the best of both worlds. Although I don't like your personality in the past, I don't like the current you even more. I don't think I've done anything wrong. It's all for the sake of mankind. Artoria looked into Wyrm's eyes without hesitation. Wyrm also looked at Artoria's serious eyes. Her eyes were both familiar and strange, and they made him feel sad. Artoria was always considerate of the people. She was born for the sake of the people. She became a king for the sake of the people. She kept fighting and killing for the sake of the people. However, because of her selfless sacrifice, the people and even some of the knights of the Round Table were afraid of her. Although it was Tristan who said that kings do not understand people's hearts. Who could guarantee that the people did not have the same thought? Maybe they already had such thoughts in their hearts, but they did not dare to say it out loud. In the end, she was betrayed by the people she protected. Until her death, she still turned into a heroic spirit to protect her people who belonged to the human race. And the Lion King in front of them was one of the many possibilities for Artoria. Because of special reasons, Artoria did not die. Instead, she picked up the Holy Lance. After receiving the Holy Lance, not only did her body develop quite well, but her heart also developed quite well. She was infinitely close to becoming a god. However, her main purpose was still to protect the human race. That was why she used such an extreme method. In Wu Ming's opinion, the reason why some of the Knights of the Round Table chose to stand against Artoria after she announced her decision was that they did not want their beloved king to continue making mistakes like this. The most obvious example was Kai. Kai was Artoria's sworn brother. Although he did not have much contact with Artoria because of Wu Ming, he and Artoria were sworn siblings after all. Because he knew Artoria well, Kai did not hesitate to stand against her. If Kai was still here, he would definitely say something like this. Since Lord Villo is not here, let me, your sworn brother, correct the king's mistake. However, Kai had already left. He was defeated by the Knights of the Round Table who stood on Artoria's side. Most of the Knights of the Round Table who chose to stand on Artoria's side wanted to show their loyalty to the king. Lancelot, Tristan, Agravain, and Gawain were all loyal to the king. Because he was the cause of the destruction of half of Camelot, Lancelot felt guilty toward Artoria. Tristan also felt guilty because he was the first to speak. Argervin had always been foolishly loyal to Artoria. Gawain also felt guilty because the destruction of Camelot could be considered to have been caused by his obsession. Unlike the Knights of the Round Table who stood on the opposite side of Artoria, these Knights of the Round Table did not care about the king's right or wrong. They just wanted to show their loyalty as the king's knights. The Knights of the Round Table who stood on the opposite side of the king were also loyal to the king. However, they did not want to be blindly loyal. They did not want to see the king go astray, so they stood on the opposite side of the king. So are you going to stop me just like Kai and the others? Artoria sat and looked up at Wu Ming who was standing in front of her. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. Kacha. The sound of the door opening could be heard. Guinevere walked in with a small cart used for serving food. I've prepared the snacks. However, when he saw the tense atmosphere between Artoria and Wu Ming, Guinevere was scared speechless. Are you guys okay? Guinevere forced a smile. Chapter 680. Don't worry, nothing will happen to me and Lily. Wu Ming smiled at Guinevere with a look that said, nothing will happen to us. Wu Ming walked to Guinevere and took the cart from Guinevere's hand. He then looked at Artoria. Let's have some snacks first. Ever since you became the queen, we barely had time to eat snacks together. Artoria stared at the snacks on the cart and nodded. No matter how things changed, Artoria's attitude towards food would not change. Seeing Artoria like this, Wu Ming couldn't help but feel relieved. Wu Ming pushed the cart over, picked up a snack, and put it in front of Artoria. Artoria paused and then looked at Wu Ming. Take it as an apology for not responding to your call in time, Lily, Wu Ming said with a gentle smile. Artoria didn't say anything, and her expression didn't change. After all, she was the queen. How could she accept food from others? Guinevere thought. But just when Guinevere thought Artoria refused, Artoria opened her mouth and ate the snack that Wu Ming gave her. I miss it, Artoria said softly. Guinevere was jealous. Mr. Villo, I want some too, Guinevere clung to Wu Ming and pouted. Yes, just like that, Wu Ming began the game of snacks, which was actually food. After the snacks were eaten, the negotiation between Wu Ming and Artoria also ended. I won't be your enemy, Lily. After all, Artoria gave the Knights of the Round Table 3 choices. One was to kill her, the second was to join her, and the third was to leave her. I will leave, but I will come back again. After Wu Ming said those words like a villain, he left the holy city without any hesitation. Although she knew that Wuming might become her enemy in the future, Artoria didn't stop Wuming. Artoria just gave an order to all the knights of the holy city, and then fell asleep again. The British silver dragon Vilo Saranth has become a rebel knight. If you meet him in the future, you can fight him. Gawain and Agrawin, who stayed in the holy city, were shocked, but they were completely loyal to Artoria and immediately accepted the order. Guinevere sat by the window, looked at the direction where Wuming left, and sighed. Mr. Vilo. After he left the holy city, Wuming, he had been going west. Wuming didn't want to be an enemy of Artoria, but he could be an enemy of the servant in the desert in the west. He could take the Holy Grail from the servant, and then find Gadotsi and the others, and restore the humanity before Artoria's plan could be carried out. After all, if Artoria's plan was successful, then even if the singularity didn't completely collapse, it would collapse because of Artoria's plan. In short, the Holy Lance was the rocket, the pure-hearted people were the transportation materials, and the entire singularity, including other humans, was the fuel to push the rocket. The fuel would be burned out, and the rocket would be successfully launched at the cost of the fuel. And even if Wuming defeated Artoria, the central control center, if the Holy Grail was not recovered, the singularity's collapse would continue. Therefore, Wuming decided to kill the Desert King first, recover the Holy Grail, find Gadotsi, and restore the humanity. Unknowingly, Wuming had already walked to the wilderness before. According to Wuming's guess, this was probably the battlefield of the war that took place in this singularity. Whether it was the Crusaders and the former holy city of Jerusalem, the Lion King and the Lionheart King, or even the current Lion King and the Desert King, the main battlefield was likely to be here. Therefore, the land here was completely dead, the trees withered and lost their vitality. Gradually, Wuming walked to the place where he first appeared. There was a sunken circle on the ground here. This was a small trick Wuming used to trap the refugees. After Wuming released the refugees, he didn't repair this place. After all, after the singularity was restored, this place would also be restored. Now it seems that this place can be used as a marker. After all, this place was quite obvious, although Wuming wouldn't get lost. After briefly reminiscing about this place, Wuming left. After all, Wuming still didn't know the enemy's information. No, it couldn't be said that he didn't know. It should be said that he didn't know at all. Wuming only knew that the other party was a pharaoh, that was all. If I knew earlier, I would have asked Lily and Veer about the Sun King. However, since things had come to this, Wuming couldn't go back. After all, I'm not weak. Wuming encouraged himself. Magic power condensed in his eyes. Wuming looked ahead, and not far away, there was a place where sand was faintly visible. That should be the edge of the desert. Although that was the case, Wuming only saw sparse sand in the place, and many places were still lifeless wastelands. Let's prepare a little. The magic power in his eyes dissipated, and Wuming said lightly. After the magic power in his eyes dissipated, more magic power emerged from Wuming's body. Blue magic power condensed from Wuming's body, like a blue flame burning Wuming's body. In an instant, the blue flame dissipated, and what was revealed was an armor formed by magic power. Then there was a cracking sound, and some fragments of armor appeared on Wuming's back. The fragments surrounded Wuming's head and turned into a helmet that looked like a dragon's head. Wuming waved his hand, and a red cape appeared from his shoulders, fluttering with the wind. Then Wuming's body flew up. After all, walking was a bit slow, so Wuming chose to use telekinesis to fly. Telekinesis was not magic, it was the evolution of powerful mental power, so it was not limited to factors such as spirit base and magic power. Just like that, Wuming began to fly toward the desert in the west. However, it wasn't long before Wuming discovered that many figures had appeared below him. Wuming took a closer look, and at the end of the black mass of figures, there was a knight in armor. Wuming took a closer look, and it was actually Tristan. Tristan? Why is he here? Wuming was puzzled. But after seeing other things, Wuming was no longer puzzled. He was chasing some refugees, and those refugees were the ones Wuming saved from Gawain at the city gate. Chapter 681. Back then, After Wuming won the bet with Gawain, Gawain let the refugees go. But Gawain also said that if Aguen knew about it, he would definitely send people to hunt them down. And even if Gawain didn't meet Aguen after sending Wuming to Artoria's bedroom, nor did he take the initiative to report to Aguen about Wuming, it was normal for Aguen to know about Wuming's arrival. After all, Aguen and Tristan were attracted by Artoria's holy lance attack, and at that time, Artoria also said that Wuming was back. Since Wuming entered the holy city, Gawain must have known about it. In addition, there was a holy selection today, so as the manager, Aguen couldn't not ask Gawain about it. And with this question, the news of the refugees being released naturally reached Aguen. And as Gawain said, Aguen directly sent Tristan to hunt down those refugees, which explained why Tristan appeared here. At this moment, those refugees were moving quickly towards the north. Looking at their route, they seemed to be heading towards the northern mountains. However, Wuming was curious about one thing. What did these refugees experience and what decision did they make to come here? Most importantly, their speed was a little too fast. There must be a reason. Wuming thought so, looked at the dense crowd of refugees, and felt the fluctuation of magic power. As a result, he really found the reason. It was a man or a woman wearing a tattered black cloth and a white skull mask on his face. It was unclear whether he was male or female. Wuming could clearly feel that it was a servant. Wuming looked at the person wearing the bone mask and vaguely had some guesses. With this appearance, I'm afraid there's only one answer. The location was the Middle East, wearing a skull mask and tattered black clothes like an assassin. It seemed that the other party was likely to be one of the elders of the mountain, Hassan Sabah. However, Wuming didn't have the time to think too much because Tristan had already caught up with the refugees. At this moment, drunk Hassan glared at Tristan who had arrived in front of the refugees he led. Damn it! Are you Knights of the Round Table always so aggressive? Smoke-drunk Hassan was quite angry. Originally, she only came here to gather information, but she accidentally found some of her compatriots, refugees. After asking around, she found out that they had escaped from the holy city. According to their compatriots, after the saint uplifting ceremony, when they were about to be killed because they were not chosen, a knight appeared and saved them by betting with them, allowing them to escape the fate of being killed. Drunk Smoke Hassan doubted if what the refugees said was true. After all, he had seen many Knights of the Round Table. Every one of them said that they were loyal to the king or something. How could they save the refugees? However, this was indeed the case. However, drunk Hassan had no time to think about the truth of the matter now. What she needed to do was to bring these compatriots to the village in the northern mountains. As a mountain person who had hostile conflicts with the Sun King in the west and the Lion King in the east, drunk Hassan clearly realized that these compatriots were not safe after leaving the holy city. As an assassin's follower, drunk Hassan had information about the saint uplifting ceremony. Those who were chosen would enter the holy city and never come out again. And those who were not chosen would be killed by those sanctimonious knights. Therefore, knowing this information, she was not surprised by the information provided by these compatriots, refugees. However, drunk Hassan also knew that these compatriots, did not know that the Lion King would hunt down those who escaped from the saint uplifting ceremony. Therefore, even if the unknown knight saved these compatriots, refugees, there would be pursuers behind them. Therefore, her task was to lead these compatriots, refugees, away from here as soon as possible. Drunk Hassan did the same. And in order to make the route of her compatriots safer, she even used a noble phantasm with group movement speed increase and group stealth effect. The reason why drunk Hassan appeared here with her compatriots, refugees, was because drunk Hassan wanted to create an illusion for the pursuers. Therefore, she led these refugees to the south of the wilderness, and prepared to head to the mountains in the north from here, instead of going directly to the north from the holy city. Unfortunately, drunk Hassan underestimated the speed and number of pursuers. She did not expect that there was only one pursuer, and it was the ruthless magic bow knight Tristan. After all, she also had contact with the Knights of the Round Table as one of Hassan's companions. Each of the Knights of the Round Table was an extraordinary powerhouse. However, if she had to choose a knight that drunk Hassan feared the most, then she would definitely choose Tristan. For some reason, the Knight of the Round Table Tristan was not like the information she found from books. The Tristan she came into contact with was neither gentle nor sensual. Instead, he was quite ruthless. In addition, he was summoned as an archer this time. Tristan, who held a magic bow in his hand, often cut the enemy into pieces. Moreover, because of the magic bow, Tristan's speed was not weak. In addition, he was not a stupid guy. Therefore, he easily found the group of refugees led by drunk Hassan. And because Tristan was alone, this made drunk Hassan's situation particularly unfavorable. Generally speaking, whether it was a retreat or a pursuit, not to mention the speed, a person who did these two things was always quite secretive. Just like drunk Hassan, if she retreated alone, then not to mention Tristan, even the Lion King himself might not be able to catch up. However, the situation this time was reversed. As an assassin who walked in the shadows, she had to lead many people to retreat in the light, and the number of pursuers became one person. Unfortunately, Tristan was quite qualified as a pursuer. Because drunk Hassan led a large group, she only discovered Tristan when he was about to approach the group of compatriots, refugees, that she led. After that, drunk Hassan fully activated his noble artifact and skills, hoping to get rid of Tristan. However, things went against her wishes. Not only did she not get rid of Tristan, but Tristan got closer to her. In the end, Tristan caught up with her and her compatriots, refugees. It's really sad. I'm not aggressive. I'm just following the rules. Tristan's voice was quite gentle, but what he did was the opposite of his voice. Whoosh, whoosh. Two of the refugees led by drunk Hassan were instantly split into two halves. They didn't even have time to wail and died directly. This terrifying scene made the refugees panic, but drunk Hassan couldn't comfort them at this moment, because, if she was careless, then she would be the same as the two corpses that had turned into four halves. Chapter 682. How sad. Tristan closed his eyes and said this sentence coldly, contrary to his current expression. However, even if Tristan's eyes were closed, drunk Hassan did not think that the other party could not see it. Your purpose is for me, right? In that case, I'll use my life in exchange for the survival of my compatriots. I hope you can retreat, drunk Hassan said. After all, chasing a group of refugees all the way to the desert. If there was no temptation, how could anyone go to this extent? Indeed, the reason why I'm chasing them like this is also for you, one of Hassan, Tristan admitted generously. However, the mission given to me by the higher-ups is to hunt down the refugees. Finding Hassan is just an unexpected surprise. In short, Tristan meant that hunting down the refugees was the main mission, and killing Hassan was just a side mission. In that case, I'll use my head as the price to make you unable to move your legs and right arm for the rest of the day. Drunk Hassan said as he picked up the dagger in his hand and slashed at his own neck. Although it was a dagger, as long as there was a special technique, it was possible to cut off a head. With her identity as Hassan, she could also throw her head to Tristan within a few seconds after the head was cut off. Although Tristan's character was not like the Knights of the Round Table of King Arthur in the books, drunk Hassan knew that even so, he was still a knight of the Lion King. She could definitely make Tristan as a knight abide by the agreement she made by using such a semi-coercive method. He hoped that after his death, these compatriots could successfully reach the mountains in the north. As long as they entered the mountains, the other Hassan hiding in them would definitely find them. That way they would be safe. Just like how time slows down before death, smoky drunk Hassan thought carefully. However, drunk Hassan found that the dagger he was slashing at himself could not be cut down. It was as if there was an invisible wall between his neck and the dagger, and this wall blocked the dagger from cutting his neck. At this moment, a voice came from beside him. If your death only requires Tristan's legs and right arm to remain motionless, then your sacrifice is meaningless. Drunk Hassan subconsciously turned his head. A silver knight, whose face could not be seen at all, was standing beside him, fully armed to the head and completely unable to see his face. The silver knight was Wyrm, who had been watching from the sky. Looking at the patterns on Wuming's armor, drunk Hassan's heart trembled. Then he quickly distanced himself from Wuming. That was because it was the coat of arms of the Knights of the Round Table. Although something prevented Smoky Drunk Hassan from committing suicide just now, Smoky Drunk Hassan found that he wasn't being controlled by others. He could still move freely. Reinforcements from the Holy City. Drunk Smoke Hassan looked at Wuming warily. However, amidst her vigilance, she also had doubts. Because if there was no one else around, then the one who used an unknown method to stop him from committing suicide would be this unknown knight in front of him. He was probably the one who said those words just now. Of course, Drunk Hassan didn't think that this knight was here to help him. After all, he probably didn't want him to commit suicide to get information from him. Moreover, Drunk Smoke Hassan had some doubts about the knight's words. What do you mean by that? Drunk Hassan asked cautiously. The sentence that Drunk Smoke Hassan asked was the sentence, "Sacrifice is meaningless." At this time, Tristan answered for Drunk Smoke Hassan. Sir Villo is right. I don't need to draw my bow at all. I can kill with just a flick of my finger. As if to verify his words, Tristan's right hand that was holding a magic bow that resembled both a bow and a zither lightly touched the strings of the zither. In an instant, invisible vacuum blades slashed towards the group of refugees along with zung-zung sounds. Not good. Drunk Smoke Hassan was shocked. Although he couldn't see Tristan's attack, Drunk Smoke Hassan knew that it was after the whoosh sound that her two compatriots became corpses. However, Drunk Smoke Hassan could only watch because he had no way to defend against such an attack. Moreover, even if he could defend against such an attack, he couldn't see Drist's attack. As a last resort, Drunk Smoke Hassan could only pray. Just like the first Hassan, although Drist's attack was launched, no one died. In other words, there was an invisible defense that blocked Drist's attack. Drunk Smoke Hassan thought in his heart and looked at Wuming. "Don't worry, unknown Hassan. I'm here to save you," Wuming said to Drunk Smoke Hassan without moving. At this time, several people suddenly became excited. "Sir Drunk Smoke, this Sir Knight is the one who saved us at the gate of the Holy City," a bold refugee shouted. Yes, Sir Drunk Smoke, I remember this Sir Knight's armor." Me too, I recognize this Sir's voice. He is the Sir Knight who saved us before." Several refugees who remembered Wuming's voice and armor trembled and stood up. Wuming looked at these people with some surprise. Although they were evil people who were not chosen by the holy light, they stood up for their benefactor. This was enough for them as ordinary people. Wuming's mouth hidden under the helmet curved up. Sure enough, it didn't mean that people who were not chosen by the holy light were evil people. They could stand up for Wuming, and they didn't disappoint Wuming who saved them before and now. Drunk Smoke Hassan, who heard the refugees' words, was a little surprised. She didn't expect that the knight who saved her compatriots was really a knight of the Round Table. She was still wondering if it was a wild servant, but she didn't expect it to be a knight of the Round Table. In this way, she didn't see the knight before. After all, the knight was likely to be summoned by the Lion King, and looking at the knight's appearance, he was likely to have betrayed the Lion King. "What do you mean, Sir Villo?" Tristan closed his eyes and looked in the direction of Wuming. Although he destroyed his eyes because he killed his compatriots before, it didn't mean that he was blind. After all, he used to like to close his eyes, and he could still move normally. Whether it was the sensitivity of his ears or the magical enhancement of his eyes, the self-destruction of his eyes had no effect on Tristan. However, in the face of Tristan's question, Wuming just replied faintly, "They are under my protection." Chapter 683. Sir Villo, your words are really sad. Are you going against my king? With a sad sigh, Tristan shook his head helplessly. Although Tristan had just left the Holy City when Artoria issued the order of Wuming as the enemy, it did not mean that Tristan was a fool. The refugees that Agul asked him to hunt down were released by Wuming. In addition, Wuming came all the way here to save these refugees, and Wuming's attitude was problematic. All these factors told Tristan that Wuming and his king were likely to have a falling out. Think what you want. In short, I will protect them today, Wuming said, and the magic power in his body condensed. Like a lion proclaiming his territory, Wuming vented his magic power. Whether it was Tristan, drunk Hassan, these refugees, or a few people from the fourth force hiding in the dark, all of them were shocked by Wuming's huge magic power. Immediately, Wuming turned to look at drunk Hassan and nodded to him. Drunk Hassan was stunned, and then nodded as if responding to Wuming. "Quick! Everyone, follow me!" Drunk Hassan shouted at the refugees. Drunk Hassan was not a fool. Since someone was willing to help him resist Tristan, then he quickly escaped with the refugees. As for gratitude, he would talk about it when he had the chance to meet in the future. Although the refugees were trembling in fear, they were people who had experienced life and death. Therefore, when drunk Hassan shouted at them, the refugees immediately reacted. The refugees hurriedly moved in the direction designated by drunk Smoke Hassan. Before the refugees moved, almost everyone gave Wuming a brief look to express their gratitude for saving their lives for the second time. Because of the urgency of time, drunk Hassan only nodded to him. After a simple expression of gratitude, she quickly followed the refugees and headed north. Seeing the refugees and drunk Hassan gradually disappear, Wuming turned his head and looked at Tristan. "You're really giving me face." After all, if Tristan attacked the refugees with all his strength, Wuming really couldn't defend against all of Tristan's attacks. "You're too serious. Even if we become enemies, I still respect you," Tristan said as he saluted Wuming. Tristan was right. If Artoria did not become the king, but Wuming became the king, then the Knights of the Round Table's loyalty to Wuming would not be lower than the current Artoria. At least, if Wuming was the king, Tristan would not say that the king did not understand people's hearts. However, there was no if. Tristan and the other Knights of the Round Table, but this did not prevent them from respecting Wuming very much. However, Tristan, who had become the Lion King's knight, now only had one goal, which was to completely eradicate the Lion King's enemies. His hands that were stained with the blood of his compatriots could no longer draw his bow. The guilt of killing his compatriots had also pushed Tristan to the brink of collapse. King Arthur's Knight of the Round Table, Tristan, had disappeared and was replaced by the Lion Knight Tristan, who had received the blessing of the Lion King's Holy Grail. Therefore, even if he killed his compatriots, he would not feel sad. Even if he attacked the person he respected the most, he would not feel guilty. That is to say, after this, you are no longer the respected Villo, but an enemy. Wuming took down the meteor silver on the right side of his head and brandished it. "As expected of you, Tristan. This powerful strike is even stronger than when you were at your peak." However, facing Wuming's praise, Tristan shook his head calmly and said in a cold tone, "Even so, didn't you instantly take out your beloved sword and block this strike?" Yes, Tristan instantly launched an invisible vacuum attack, and Wuming instantly took out the meteor silver, allowing Tristan's strike to hit the meteor silver. The reason why Wuming used the meteor silver to block the attack instead of blocking it with his psychic power was because Wuming was ready to fight. "I really hope that Sir Villo can take the initiative to step aside. If you do that, after I deal with the refugees and that Hassan, I can still plead for you to the king." Tristan shook his head regretfully. Tristan's arrogant words made Wuming smile. "You know my personality. If you don't defeat me, don't even think about leaving today." After Wuming finished speaking, magic power burst out from his feet. In an instant, Wuming burst toward Tristan. Facing Wuming, who rushed over, Tristan picked up his magic bow expressionlessly. "That's really sad, Sir Villo. The battle was about to start. Not far away, the fourth force hidden here secretly hid in a place with a lot of stones. Don't look, dear Da Vinci. Hurry up and think about what we should do next." An orange-haired girl lowered her voice and looked at a big sister, who looked almost exactly like Mona Lisa with a sad and helpless face. This orange-haired girl was the last master of humans who solved the 5 singularities and formed a fate with many heroic spirits. The normal master of the Human Survival Protection Organization. Finest Chaldea, finest Tachika Gadotsi. And the big sister Mona Lisa beside Gadotsi was the third servant summoned by the former director of Chaldea, Leonardo da Vinci. In addition, beside the two, there was a little girl dressed in sexy clothes. Cough cough. Gadotsi's contracted servant. The subservient possessed by the Holy Grail Knight Galahad, Matthew Gillett. As early as when Tristan caught up with drunk Smokehasen, and Wooming stopped Tristan, the three of them had already arrived here. When Da Vinci said that whether it's a bow or a full body armor, we can't beat them, Gadazzi and Matthew were pulled away by Da Vinci to hide. The reason why Gadazzi suddenly asked was that Da Vinci's expression at the moment was a little strange. At this moment, as if watching a play, Da Vinci looked at the fierce confrontation between the Holy Sword Knight and the Magic Bow Knight not far ahead. Well, what's the matter, Tachika? Isn't it good for us to benefit from the fight between two tigers? Da Vinci didn't look back and continued to look forward happily. The good student Matthew raised his hand and asked Da Vinci puzzledly. But Da Vinci, the Silver Knight seems to be a good person, shouldn't we help? Gadazzi, who was standing at the side, also nodded vigorously. Because Da Vinci said that the two knights were not ordinary servants, the three of them hid far away just in case. Although the distance was a little too far, Gadazzi couldn't hear the conversation. But through her own eyes, Gadazzi could still see the current situation. The knight with the bow killed a few people, and the servant suspected to be one of Hassan wanted to commit suicide, but for some reason, he stopped when the Silver Knight appeared. After that, the servant suspected to be Hassan left with the refugees, leaving the Silver Knight to fight against the Magic Bow Knight. In this way, the Silver Knight was likely to be a good person. Facing the doubts of Matthew and Gadazzi, Da Vinci smiled and explained, "Let's not talk about how you two judged that the Silver Knight is a good person. Moreover, we can't intervene in the battle between servants of their level." Chapter 684. Gadazzi and Matthew both exclaimed and then calmed down. It seemed that what Da Vinci said was right. Then do we need to leave? Gadazzi asked. After all, the refugees had already left, and they couldn't intervene in the battle between the two knights. It seemed that the only answer left was to leave. However, Da Vinci smiled and shook his head. This made Gadazzi and Matthew confused. Why was he so hesitant to advance and not to retreat? Why was he being so hesitant? At this time, Gadazzi's bracelet made a sound. Well, I think Da Vinci meant for you to wait and see. I forgot that there was a doctor, Matthew said awkwardly. Matthew's words are really hurtful. Even if I couldn't contact you for a while, you wouldn't have forgotten about me. Roman's words were full of powerlessness. When Gadazzi and the other two came to this singularity, they appeared directly in the desert. Because of the enchantment, Gadazzi and the other two had lost contact with Chaldea for a while. It wasn't until they walked out of the desert that they contacted Roman. After that, after a brief understanding of Gadazzi's experience, Roman and Da Vinci suggested that they go to the Holy City to have a look. Previously, in order to contact Gadazzi, Roman had risked his life a little. Therefore, he rested for a while and didn't say anything. In addition, Roman's presence was indeed a little low, so Gadazzi and the other two know it should be Gadazzi and Matthew, ignored Roman for a while. Oh, I'm sorry, Gadazzi smiled embarrassedly. Forget it, after all, I'm used to it. Fortunately, the director is not here, or I would be scolded again. After all, it was the fault of the person operating the spirit particle transfer device that sent Gadazzi and the other two to an unknown enchantment. Speaking of Olga Marie, Matthew remembered something and asked, "Is Miss Teeps still in the superintendent's room?" Then Roman's voice was heard. "Yes, that's right. This time, the director has figured out a little bit of the third method. As the director's follower, Miss Teeps was naturally affected. They haven't come out yet." As he spoke, Roman began to feel distressed. "If it weren't for the fact that Miss Teeps couldn't accompany you to the singularity this time, I wouldn't have let Da Vinci accompany you." Due to the third law of Olga Marie's body, Pamilia was unable to accompany Gadazzi and Matthew on the singularity exploration. Therefore, Leonardo da Vinci, who had volunteered to accompany Gadazzi and Matthew, had volunteered to accompany them. After all, I am also a follower of Chaldea. I haven't been to the singularity even once, Leonardo da Vinci said with a heartless smile. "I hope you can accompany me here. If you are here, I'm afraid there won't be an accident with the spirit particle transfer. Even if there is an accident, with your technology, you can break through the enchantment and contact Tachika." Roman sighed. This was not a compliment. After many tribulations, the various equipment of Chaldea had been upgraded by the genius Da Vinci. If Da Vinci were to operate it, it would be much better than Roman. Well, you can contact us now. It's already very good. Da Vinci comforted Roman. Boom. Suddenly, an explosion sounded not far away from Gadazzi and the other two. The explosion set off a gust of wind mixed with gravel and hit Gadazzi. "Senior, be careful." Matthew shouted and instantly materialized a shield in front of Gadazzi. Clang, clang, clang. The gravel was like a bullet, hitting Matthew's shield, making a messy collision sound. After a while, the wind calmed down, and the gravel no longer shot at Matthew's shield. "Senior, are you okay?" Matthew turned to look at Gadazzi with concern. "I'm fine. Thank you, Matthew. It's all thanks to you." Gadazzi smiled and gratefully hugged Matthew. "Senior, it's good that you're okay." Matthew's face was slightly red as he turned his head. At this time, Leonardo da Vinci spoke with a strange voice. "Allah's big sister, I was ignored just like that. I'm so sad, ugh." Gadazzi and Matthew looked at Leonardo da Vinci helplessly. "Speaking of which, dear Leonardo da Vinci, do you really mean that we should wait and see like what the doctor said?" Gadazzi asked in a hurry. The reason why she was so anxious was because those 2 nights are almost here. "Senior, dear Leonardo da Vinci?" Matthew looked at Wyrm and Tristan, who were gradually approaching them, and reminded in a panic. It was precisely because Wyrm and Tristan were fighting that they got closer to this side, that the situation of gravel flying everywhere happened. And they couldn't beat the other party at the moment. If they were discovered, they would definitely be treated as thieves. Maybe there would be another misunderstanding, and they would have to start fighting with the other party again. However, according to Leonardo da Vinci, they couldn't beat the other party at all, whether it was a one-on-one or a group fight. "Don't worry, take a closer look at the fully armed knight over there," Leonardo da Vinci reminded them. Hearing that, Gadazzi and Matthew looked at Wyrm, who was gradually suppressing Tristan. Suddenly, Gadazzi and Matthew came to a realization. "It's assassin. It's Senior Sira?" The two of them saw the armor worn by the knight who was suppressing Tristan. The armor was basically the same as the armor that Wyrm entrusted to Gadazzi when she left the fifth singularity. "That's right, that's Sira's armor." Leonardo da Vinci had an expression of, "You finally realized." Gadazzi and Matthew could only scratch their heads helplessly. After all, Gadazzi was just an ordinary person. Because of the distance, although Gadazzi could still see Wyrm, she couldn't see it clearly. Matthew was the same. As an immature subservient, she couldn't add magic to her eyes to improve her vision like Leonardo da Vinci, so she couldn't see it clearly. And now they could see it clearly, and Gadazzi and Matthew also understood why Leonardo da Vinci didn't let them go. Because the person in the armor was likely to be Wyrm. Moreover, even if the other party wasn't Wyrm, he must be someone who had a great relationship with Wyrm. Therefore, choosing to contact the other party was the most advantageous option at the moment. "What? That knight is Sira? That's too ridiculous. He's a warrior of Ulster. How could he come here?" Roman felt that his brain had gone haywire. First it was the Egyptian pharaoh, and then the Lionheart King that Roman proposed to contact was gone. Then a Lionheart King appeared out of nowhere, and there was also a knight who seemed to be an acquaintance. No matter what, the other party is related to Assassin, so he must be a good person. Gadazzi decided that she would contact the other party. "Then Senior, should we help the enemy who seems to be Senior Sira?" However, Leonardo da Vinci answered first. "I don't think so. Because Wyrm had already defeated Tristan." Chapter 685. A moment later, Wyrm rushed towards Tristan with meteor silver in his hand. Facing Tristan, although Wyrm was a little cautious, he didn't care too much about Tristan. Tristan's fame wasn't as big as Wyrm, but Wyrm didn't think that Tristan was weak. On the contrary, Tristan was very strong, not weaker than Lancelot. Knights of the Round Table were considered the best among the servants. And all Knights of the Round Table had the adaptability of the saber, swordsman class. It was reasonable to say that Tristan should also be a swordsman, but because Tristan's magic bow was more famous than his sword-wielding deeds, Tristan's archer, class adaptability was much higher than the saber, swordsman, class adaptability. And this time Tristan was an archer class. Even if it wasn't the best saber, swordsman class, the archer class itself was one of the 3 excellent knight classes. Therefore, Tristan wasn't afraid of Wu Ming, who was a saber, swordsman class. His magic bow, not to mention the speed and angle of the vacuum arrow, the speed of his magic bow could catch the enemy off guard. No matter how good the person's martial arts were, they couldn't completely avoid his attack. However, as a member of the Round Table, Wu Ming naturally knew this. But Wu Ming was still not afraid of Tristan. And the reason why Wu Ming wasn't afraid of Tristan was also discovered by Tristan, and that was he couldn't hurt Wu Ming at all. Ding ling ling ling. Tristan gently plucked the strings of the magic bow in his hand, and several invisible attacks appeared out of thin air and attacked Wu Ming. Zung zung zung. The vacuum blade made a sound in the air, and Tristan was sure that his attack had hit Wu Ming. But the opponent was completely fine? This again. Tristan frowned slightly, then suddenly rolled and dodged the sword chi released by Wu Ming using meteor silver. The sword chi of meteor silver slashed into the ground, and the originally barren land instantly had a deep gully that wasn't wide. Every time Tristan attacked Wu Ming, those invisible vacuum blades that slashed onto Wu Ming had no effect, as if a machete was cutting cotton. However, in Tristan's impression, as a knight of the Round Table, he didn't have such a strange ability. Closing his eyes, Tristan relaxed his brows and looked at Wu Ming. It seems that you still have some tricks up your sleeve. However, Tristan's didn't pay his words. SSSSS. What's in SSSSSS? SSSS. S's. It couldn't be helped. No matter what kind of clothing or armor it was, it couldn't defend against the attack of vacuum, unless it was some kind of special clothing or armor. However, this did not mean that Wu Ming was defenseless. The principle of the vacuum arrow was to use atmospheric pressure to attack. Wu Ming concentrated all of his mental power on the surface of his body, pushing out all of the air on the surface of his body. As a result, a layer of vacuum formed on the surface of Wu Ming's body. As for Wu Ming's mental power, after pushing out the air, it constantly caused friction between the surrounding air and the vacuum zone, causing a fault to form between the vacuum zone and the air. As long as something approached Wu Ming's surroundings, it would be cut off by the fault around Wu Ming's body. This caused Silent Cry to be surrounded by a layer of invisible vacuum defense. Using fire to attack fire, water to attack water, and air to attack air would cancel each other out. When Tristan's vacuum arrow came into contact with Wu Ming, the vacuum arrow and vacuum zone canceled each other out. That was why it was said that the power of science was the greatest. For an ancient person like Tristan, it wasn't that Wu Ming mocked him, but he was indeed outdated. Of course, Wu Ming definitely wouldn't tell Tristan about his methods. That's why, can't you retreat yourself? Although Wu Ming said that, he had no intention of letting Tristan leave. The moment Wu Ming finished his words, he released magical power from his feet and attacked Tristan once again. Tristan shook his head calmly. Although his attacks were basically useless against Wu Ming, and his vacuum traps were also likely to be ineffective, Tristan didn't think that Wu Ming could keep defending against his attacks. For example, noble artifacts and the like. The outcome isn't certain yet. The moment before Wu Ming attacked, Tristan used the power of the wind brought about by the magic bow to move his body swiftly and easily dodged Wu Ming's attack. Boom! Wu Ming's sword fiercely struck the ground where Tristan had been standing. Only a dong sound could be heard, and crushed stones flew everywhere. Then, I shall defeat you with my next attack. In an instant, Wu Ming raised the meteor silver. Tristan's blind eyes trembled slightly. He understood what Wu Ming was trying to do. Wu Ming was about to unleash his noble artifact. However, this was exactly what Tristan wanted because he was about to unleash his noble artifact. Stained with the blood of the legendary dragon, and comparable to Excalibur? Tristan looked at the glowing holy sword in Wu Ming's hand. After all, he and Wu Ming were once comrades and he knew quite a lot about this holy sword. If it's the noble artifact, I can't defeat you. At this moment, Wu Ming's holy sword was shining brightly. Although Tristan said that he couldn't defeat him, he still picked up the magic bow. However, I have the blessings of my king, so the outcome is still uncertain. X silver. Fail not. Almost at the same time, Wyrm and Tristan unleashed their noble artifacts at the same time. Tristan's hand continuously moved his magic bow at an extremely fast speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. In an instant, countless vacuum threads that were almost visible to the naked eye wrapped around Wyrm at an extremely fast speed. Wyrm stood in the same place, holding the holy sword that was getting more and more solid. But what made Tristan puzzled was that Wyrm didn't move at all. Tristan couldn't help but frown. He clearly remembered that Wyrm's noble artifact was the same as Artoria's light cannon. But now, Wyrm actually hid the light of the holy sword. Tristan didn't understand what Wyrm was doing, but it didn't hinder his noble artifact. Tristan controlled the magic bow with one hand and plucked the bowstring, or rather, the strings of the zither with the other. Although Wyrm used an unknown method to defend against his attack, the change in quantity led to a qualitative change. The pond couldn't withstand the impact of the sea, the flame couldn't withstand the impact of the explosion, and the more powerful and chaotic vacuum would devour the weaker vacuum. Coupled with the Lion King's blessing, as long as these attacks hit, Tristan could guarantee that Wyrm would be seriously injured even if he didn't retreat. However, just as Tristan's countless vacuum threads were about to approach Wyrm suddenly entered a purplish-black ripple and disappeared. What? Chapter 686. Tristan controlled the threads to enter the dark purple ripple, trying to catch up to Wyrm, who was engulfed by the dark purple ripple. Then Tristan was stabbed in the back. Slash! The sound of a sword piercing into flesh came from behind Tristan. What? PFFF. Tristan gasped in disbelief. Then he spat out a mouthful of blood. He could clearly feel an attack from a noble artifact slashing his back. Even though he couldn't see his back, Tristan could still feel that the slash had slashed his back from his shoulder to his lower back. The invincible Tristan fell. Then he turned his head around and looked behind him. Two dark purple ripples appeared behind Tristan, similar to the one where Wyrm was. In one of the ripples, countless threads that belonged to Tristan's noble relic also came out. However, these threads entered the second dark purple ripple. As for where the threads that entered the second dark purple ripple went, Tristan had no idea. However, he now knew how Wyrm got behind him and avoided his noble relic that went deep into the dark purple ripple. You should have heard some rumors, right? I'm not human. Tristan removed his noble relic and Wyrm kept the three dark purple ripples. Tristan nodded helplessly. Yes, that's right. I've heard rumors that Sir Villo isn't human. Tristan began to use the term of address. And since Tristan said so, it meant that he was aware of Wyrm's situation. Even so, you and His Majesty are still the most respected people among the Knights of the Round Table. Tristan's tone started to become gentle, as if the words of a dying man are kind. However, Wyrm kicked Tristan unhappily. All right, you're talking like you're leaving. I've held back. I didn't hurt your spirit core. Although Tristan's back was slashed open by Wyrm's noble artifact, and he spat out a lot of blood, Tristan's spirit core was not injured at all. Servants were made of magical power. Whether it was blood, bones, or anything else, they were all made of magical power. As long as the most important spirit core was not destroyed, and there was enough magical power, then the servant would not leave. Generally speaking, when a servant was injured, they would replenish their mana from their master. Although Tristan was a servant summoned by the Lion King, his master was not the Lion King. He was a servant summoned by the Holy Grail without a master. Not only Tristan, but all the Knights of the Round Table, including Tristan, had no followers. The only reason they were under the Lion King was because they were King Arthur's knights. If they wanted to rebel, the Lion King would not have used a command charm to control them. This was also the reason why the Lion King allowed the knights to make a choice in the beginning. It was because the Lion King was not their master, so they had the right to choose for themselves. To become the king's sword in the Lion King's hand, or to become the imperial sword that stabbed the Lion King. Some people chose to become the Lion King's sword, and some people became the Death Admonishers. After that, the Lion King's sword slaughtered the Death Admonishers who held the imperial sword. Therefore, as the Lion King's blade, Tristan wasn't the Lion King's follower. In addition, he didn't have the means to replenish his mana. Therefore, even if his spiritual core wasn't damaged, he could only leave the stage. Are you going to save me? Tristan asked in confusion. Wu Ming nodded as a matter of course. Since your spirit core is not injured, then as long as I provide you with mana, you can recover. However, Tristan's face was still full of confusion. Lord Wyrm, you've defeated me, so of course I'm yours to deal with, but please don't try to use me to deal with my king. If you do, I'll use my noble phantasm to kill myself in an instant after you heal me. The reason why Tristan chose to stand on the Lion King's side was because he was also the source of King Arthur's tragedy. Although his joke in his previous life was not the direct cause of King Arthur's death, King Arthur's death was also related to Tristan. Therefore, in this world, Tristan decided that no matter what, he would stand on the Lion King's side and completely become the Lion King's sword. Wu Ming, who had already guessed Tristan's thoughts, naturally would not let Tristan deal with the Lion King. You and I are also colleagues. I don't need to use my colleagues to deal with my king. I need your strength only to get you to help me seize the Holy Grail from the Sun King in the West. That's right. Although Wu Ming felt that he also had the ability to seize the Holy Grail from the Sun King, he had now discovered Gadatsi's trace. When Wu Ming and Tristan were fighting, Wu Ming discovered Gadatsi hiding in the distance because he was constantly moving. Why did Wu Ming come to this singularity? Wasn't it to help Gadatsi repair the singularity? And why did Wu Ming go to the desert in the west to find the Sun King? Wasn't it to obtain the Holy Grail? And the Holy Grail was to give it to Gadatsi, so that they could repair the singularity. By the way, it could also stop Artoria's stubborn thoughts. When the singularity was repaired, even the gods would not be able to affect this place. After all, the era had eliminated the gods, and the goddess Lungaminiad would also be eliminated by the era of repair. Although Artoria's change also attracted a lot of Wu Ming's attention, Wu Ming was not a person who put the cart before the horse. His primary goal was still to help Gadatsi repair the singularity. And now that he had coincidentally found Gadatsi, Wu Ming would definitely act together with her. And looking at the direction where Gadatsi and the others were heading, it seemed that they had just walked out of the desert, so Wu Ming was not sure if they were going to return to the desert. Therefore, Wu Ming now needed a helper. I need you to go to the desert and wait for orders to prepare for me to seize the Sun King's Holy Grail. Wu Ming's words made Tristan ponder. As the loser, he was not killed by the other party, so he would not be a knight if he did not return the Holy Grail. And the other party did not do anything against the Lion King, so it seemed that it was acceptable. Wu Ming's next words were the last straw that broke the camel's back. Don't forget, the Sun King is also the Lion King's enemy. If you can help me eliminate the Sun King, then you will have done something that cannot be ignored. I accept your proposal, Lord Villo. Chapter 687. Tristan's surrender made Wu Ming nod in satisfaction. Then Wu Ming and Tristan signed a contract. Wu Ming would provide Tristan with a large amount of mana to support his own recovery. And the price was that Tristan would temporarily become Wu Ming's subordinate. Wu Ming could order Tristan to do anything, but he couldn't order Tristan to do anything that was disadvantageous to the Lion King. This contract was two-way. Whether it was Wu Ming or Tristan, once they violated the contract, they would be counterattacked by the contract. Even so, this contract was still disadvantageous to Tristan. Firstly, the contract only required Wu Ming to provide mana, while Tristan had to listen to Wu Ming's orders. In comparison, the contract was quite disadvantageous to Tristan. Secondly, even if there was a counterattack from the contract, with Wu Ming's strength and means, Wu Ming wouldn't be in any situation at all. And if Tristan were to be counterattacked by the contract, the destruction of his spirit core would be the least of it. If it was more serious, Tristan's spirit foundation would collapse and he would be sent to the martyr's palace. However, this couldn't be helped. Who asked Wu Ming to be the strong? The strong wouldn't be bound by rules. Only the weak Tristan would be bound by the contract. This was the case in all aspects. After establishing a mana link with Tristan and providing Tristan with a large amount of mana to recover, Wu Ming looked at the pile of rocks not far away. In the battle just now, Wu Ming inadvertently found the hiding place of Gadatsi and the others. It should be there. Wuming was about to speak, but he suddenly thought of something and stopped Wuming. Then Wuming snapped his fingers mischievously. A black-purple ripple appeared in the air above the pile of rocks. Then, a few large rocks that Wuming got from somewhere fell out of the black-purple teleportation gate. Ah! Senior! Watch out! Matthew's scream was the first to be heard. Those over there, please come out. Wuming deliberately lowered his voice and spoke to Gadatsi and the others in a rough voice. Although Tristan was puzzled as to why Wuming would change his voice to speak to the few hidden figures, he was still considered Wuming's subordinate after all. Therefore, he obediently shut his mouth and used the mana provided by Wuming to repair his body. Although Gadatsi's group had hidden themselves well in the beginning, due to Tristan constantly changing positions during his fight with Wuming, Tristan had long since discovered Gadatsi's group. But at that time, Tristan had to deal with Wuming first, so he didn't care about them. On Gadatsi's side, Matthew protected Gadatsi and Da Vinci with his shield. The surroundings were filled with scattered rocks that smashed onto Matthew's shield. Matthew put down his shield and looked at Gadatsi uneasily. What should we do, Senior? The other party seems to have discovered us. Because Wu Ming had added magic power to his words, Wu Ming's words sounded like he was whispering into the ears of Gadatsi and the other two. Because of this, whether it was Matthew or Gadatsi, they had already discovered that the other party's voice was not Wu Ming's. Dear Da Vinci, what should we do now? Gadatsi looked at Da Vinci in a panic. The reason why Gadatsi asked this was because Da Vinci did not show the slightest panic. Since the other party has discovered us, then let's go out. Da Vinci smiled lightly. After all, what else could they do other than go out? They didn't have any way to leave in an instant, so they could only go out and face the difficulties. Therefore, Gadatsi, Matthew, and Da Vinci walked out from the pile of rocks. The three of them approached Wuming and Tristan, then Gadatsi spoke first. I'm sorry, we didn't mean to hide. You don't have to explain. But he suddenly interrupted Gadatsi. Then Wuming looked at Tristan, who had recovered and was able to stand up. Go to the desert and wait for orders. If possible, find a place to completely recover your spirit base. At this moment, Wuming's voice was still rough. Yes, Sir Villo. Tristan responded and walked towards the west. Since the deal had been made, Tristan would obediently abide by it. After all, this was a night. Tristan looked at Gadatsi and the other two vaguely. He had more or less guessed the other party's identity. However, he did not have the chance to return to the Holy City for the time being, so he could not report this news. However, Tristan did not think that a mere human master could affect the Lion King, so there was no need to be too concerned. Shaking his head, Tristan sped up and headed towards the desert area in the west. Gadatsi and Matthew watched the cold-looking night leave. That night with the strange bow should be Tristan. Suddenly Da Vinci spoke. Wait. Da Vinci, what are you doing? Gadatsi looked at Da Vinci in panic. Matthew also moved his shield and prepared for battle. At this moment, Gadatsi and Matthew were extremely nervous. Past experience told Gadatsi and Matthew that if the conversation was not careful, it would definitely turn into a battle. And they did not seem to be able to defeat the knight in front of them. Listening to the other party's voice, the other party was not the person they knew. Even if the other party was related to the person they knew, they would have to talk slowly. However, Da Vinci spoke as if they were familiar with each other. How could this not make Gadatsi and Matthew worried? You two don't have to worry. Didn't you see that the other party didn't do anything? Da Vinci pointed at Wuming indifferently. Gadatsi and Matthew looked at Wuming, and found that the other party did not do anything. Although there was indeed no movement, Gadatsi still quietly whispered in Da Vinci's ear. But Da Vinci, it's better to be careful. Tachika, whispering to the people around you before you can distinguish whether the other party is an enemy or a friend. Such behavior will cause the other party to be dissatisfied. Sigh. This voices, Gadatsi and Matthew both looked at Wuming blankly. Because this time, Wuming used his own voice. Assassin. Senior Sira? Gadatsi and Matthew both shouted in surprise. Wuming knowingly took off the helmet and clipped it to his waist. The knight who took off the helmet revealed the face that Gadotsi and Matthew were familiar with. Then, the face smiled and greeted Gadotsi and Matthew. "Long time no see, Tachika Matthew." Chapter 688. Gadotsi excitedly ran towards Wuming. Matthew, who was worried, wanted to follow her but was stopped by Da Vinci. Matthew looked at Da Vinci in confusion, but Da Vinci just smiled and shook his head at Matthew. Although Matthew still wanted to accompany Gadotsi, Gadotsi had already run to Wuming's side. Gadotsi suddenly pounced into Wuming's arms. The moment before Gadotsi pounced in, Wuming turned his helmet into magic power and threw the meteor silver. The golden ripples instantly engulfed it. Due to inertia, Wuming hugged Gadotsi and spun around a few times, successfully making Gadotsi laugh. "Wad assassin, I missed you so much, ha ha ha." Wuming hugged Gadotsi and spun a few more times, then stopped and put Gadotsi on the ground. Wuming then stroked Gadotsi's little head, as if he was looking at a little sister who needed love. "I missed you too, Tachika." At this time, Gadotsi's watch suddenly emitted the sound of Roman's crazy and disbelief. "Are you for real? Are you really Sierra? This is unbelievable. If I didn't hear wrongly, the knight just called you a Villo? Could it be that you are King Arthur's first knight of the Round Table, Villo Sierra Ed? But that's impossible. You are obviously Sierra of Ulster. How could you become King Arthur's knight? The timeline doesn't match at all." Then Roman seemed to have thought of something and his voice stopped abruptly. This made Gadotsi a little confused for a moment, thinking, "What's wrong with the doctor? Why did he suddenly stop talking after a long speech?" Wuming could not help but laugh at Roman's reaction. Ever since he knew about Gidea's identity, he was completely sure of Roman's identity and did not have the slightest doubt. And since Roman was that person, it was not strange that he knew about Wuming. But Roman could not show it. After all, he was just an ordinary human. "Well, I forgot, you are a mysterious guy who has always been alive. If that's the case, then it's understandable that you left a record in history across time. Ahahaha." Roman laughed. It had to be said that Roman's answer to himself was rather perfect. If he had been alive all this time, he would have been able to recover from his previous shock. It seems that this guy also enjoys being a human. Wuming could see that Roman's surprise for Wuming was indeed real. This meant that the other party did not rely on his previous strength, but relearned as a human. "But how much effort did you put in that ordinary people can't even catch up with you, Roman Aceman?" Wuming silently glanced at Gadotsi's watch that sent out Roman's communication sound. He seemed to see the young man with a helpless smile on his face. On the other side, Gadotsi just reacted from a sudden realization. Indeed, Wuming once generously admitted that he was still alive, so Wuming was likely to exist in human history a long time ago. Then it was not strange that Wuming had multiple names and legends. Then, Gadotsi hugged Wuming again with a happy face. "As expected of assassin, you're still very powerful." Wuming also smiled and hugged Gadotsi, but his eyes were thinking about something. "It seems that I guessed correctly," Wuming thought in his heart. Wuming obviously did not have much contact with Gadotsi, at most only a few times, but just these few times raised Wuming's favorability in Gadotsi's heart to the extreme. On the other hand, Gadotsi's favorability in Wuming's heart also rose to a high level. But whether it was Gadotsi or Wuming, their favorability in their hearts was not the kind of love between a man and a woman, but the kind of affection similar to family. To Gadotsi, Wuming, who appeared several times to help her, was like her brother. And to Wuming, Gadotsi was like a younger sister who encountered trouble and needed help many times. And the reason why there was such a feeling, Wuming guessed that the problem was with Gadotsi. However, even if he had guessed that the problem was with Gadotsi, Wuming did not find any abnormalities with Gadotsi. When Gadotsi threw herself into Wuming's arms, Wuming had already probed Gadotsi's body. But unfortunately, Gadotsi was completely an ordinary magician, and the kind that was at the rookie level. Except for some magic and the command spell in Gadotsi's hand, Wuming did not find any other mystery on Gadotsi's body. However, the most unusual thing was that there was no abnormality. Wuming raised his head and looked at the huge aperture that had always existed in the sky. Could it be that Gidia did something to Tachika? As soon as this thought appeared in Wuming's mind, it was immediately cut off by Wuming himself. There was no other reason. How could a contractor who had formed a fate with many heroic spirits be affected by Gidia? Don't underestimate the star crystallization of human faith, and don't underestimate the miraculous existence called heroic spirits. Senior. At this time, Matthew's voice came from behind Gadatsi, which was in front of Wuming. He saw Mashu holding her big shield and running towards him, while Da Vinci was following behind her at a leisurely pace. By the way, Da Vinci walked over. Matthew. Gadatsi broke away from Wuming's arms and waved at Matthew. After Matthew came to Gadatsi's side, he began to greet Wuming. Senior Sira, long time no see. However, Wuming smiled and shook his head. Call me Senior Villo, Matthew. Ha. Villo. Senior? Matthew was taken aback, and there was a slight change in his eyes, but he quickly recovered. Matthew looked at his hand, somewhat at a loss. Matthew could feel that Galahad, who was sleeping in his body, woke up for a moment, but then fell asleep. Maybe it's because Galahad, who was sleeping in your body, suddenly woke up because she saw the person she respected the most. Da Vinci, who was a step behind, explained slowly. Hey. Is Senior Sira really the Knight of the Round Table, Villo Sira Ed? Matthew was shocked. The answer to Matthew was Wuming's familiar, yet unfamiliar words. It's the real deal, Junior. Ahem. Here, I'll explain to everyone the issue of the address between Galahad and Villo. No matter in any records, Galahad always called the Villo Senior. Da Vinci kindly reminded. So, I have two seniors. Mashu said with excitement and uneasiness. However, Wuming shook his head. Matthew as a subservient. Matthew does have two seniors, but you have to remember, as Matthew Gillett, you only have one senior, and that is Tachika Fujimaru. After all, only Galahad Sr. was Villo Sira Ed, and Matthew Gillett Sr. was Gadatsi. Matthew and Gadatsi, who heard Wuming's words, were slightly touched. Just listen to Assassin Matthew. Gadatsi said to Matthew with a smile. Facing Gadatsi and Wuming's smiling faces, Matthew nodded heavily. Yes, Senior. Chapter 689. Then the genius Da Vinci, who didn't know how to break the atmosphere, personally broke the beautiful atmosphere. Alright, it's about time to talk about the Villo. First of all, why did the Villo pretend that he didn't recognize us? Da Vinci's words made Roman, who had been listening through Gadatsi's watch communicator, react. Yeah, I would have forgotten if Da Vinci didn't mention it. Why did you change your voice and pretend that you didn't recognize us? Although Roman was good at judging the situation, since Da Vinci had broken the atmosphere, he had nothing to worry about. That's right. I really thought that it was going to turn into a battle again. Phew, Gadatsi said doubtfully and finally let out a sigh of relief. Also, the falling rocks were done by Senior Villo, right? Then why did Senior Villo do that? Matthew also looked at Wuming doubtfully. Cough. Actually, I had my reasons for doing that. Wuming coughed without changing his expression, and then became serious. Could it be that you wanted to hide your relationship with Chaldea in front of the knight? Roman assisted Wuming by forcefully explaining. Yes, that's right, that's it. Wuming immediately nodded and admitted without hesitation. Thinking about it carefully, Assassin did recognize us after the knight left and used her real voice to talk to us. Gadatsi also pondered and said, That's right. After all, if I directly used my own voice, Tachika would definitely recognize me. Moreover, the falling rocks were to prevent Tristan from suspecting you. That's why I did that. Wuming immediately took advantage of the situation and started to talk nonsense. After all, he couldn't possibly say that he was just being impulsive. Other than Da Vinci, who looked at Wuming with a smile, whether it was Matthew, Gadatsi, or Roman, who wasn't here and only understood the situation through the conversation, they all believed Wuming's words. Wuming hurriedly tried to muddle through, so he quickly diverted everyone's attention. Speaking of which, did you guys come out from the desert? From the position of Gadatsi and the other two, the probability of them coming out from the desert was very high. Gadatsi nodded as Wuming expected. Yeah, We were teleported directly into the desert by spirit particle transference. Gadatsi then told Wuming their experience. First, they entered the desert, causing the desert's enchantment to cut off the connection between Gadatsi and Chaldea. After that, Gadatsi and the others encountered the desert's divine beast, Sphinx. After defeating the Sphinx, Gadatsi and the other two naturally had to explore. After all, they couldn't contact Chaldea at that time, so they couldn't just sit back and wait for death. Fortunately, Da Vinci followed them. After searching through Da Vinci's equipment, the three found a water source and a city. On the way to the city, the three encountered a large group of Sphinx. However, these Sphinx didn't give Gadatsi and the others a headache, because a group of men in black repelled the Sphinx group. After that, because the men in black looked a bit like bad guys and they really caught a sleeping woman, Gadatsi and the others came to her rescue. After that, the woman woke up and thought that they kidnapped her, so they fought with the other party again. Fortunately, Mr. Lucius came to help. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to go. Matthew gasped for breath. Lucius. Wuming made a puzzled sound. Yes, that's a knight. He happened to pass by when we were misunderstood by Miss Nittacles and saw the truth, so he came out to help us clarify the misunderstanding. Matthew nodded. So where is he now? Wuming wanted to meet this knight named Lucius. He always felt that he was also a key clue. Mr. Lucius left after he helped us. We don't know where he went either. Matthew's words disappointed Wuming a little. By the way, Nittacles is a pharaoh's follower. After we cleared up the misunderstanding, she brought us to the shrine in the desert. Gadatsi immediately changed the topic. Temple? Did you see the Sun King? Hearing Gadatsi say that they went to the temple in the desert, Wuming put his attention to Lucius aside. Yes, Nittacles is not the owner of this desert, so after we passed Nittacles' test, she took us to the temple to meet the owner of this desert. It should be the Sun King you mentioned. Gadatsi answered Wuming. Wuming was not surprised that Nittacles was not the owner of this desert. If she was the owner of this desert, she would not have been taken away in her sleep. Then can you tell me who the other party is? Wuming looked at Gadatsi and the others seriously. Of course, assassin, you're being too polite. Gadatsi looked at Wuming with some resentment. Sorry. Wuming immediately patted Gadatsi's head and apologized. The head patting was still very effective on Gadatsi. At this time, Da Vinci answered Wuming's question. The other party is Ramses II. It's actually Ramses II, Wuming said with some surprise. There was no other reason but because Ramses II was a little too powerful. The king pharaoh, who ruled the area of Egypt from the 13th to the 14th century BC, was both the son of the sun god and its incarnation. Moreover, Ramses II also built many buildings, and even classified the previous buildings as his own. In fact, it made sense when he thought about it this way. Because Ramses II had a large number of buildings under his name, these buildings were sublimated into relics and created a large area of desert similar to an inherent barrier. Unfortunately, we did not find a second city in the desert. This desert was summoned together with Ramses II, not his temple. Da Vinci seemed to have seen through Wuming's thoughts and directly shattered Wuming's fantasy. Wuming was a little overwhelmed. I'm just kidding. In fact, Ramses II moved all the temples together, so you can't see other temples in other parts of the desert. Wuming narrowed his eyes and stared at Da Vinci. At this moment, Wuming felt that this guy was more mischievous than himself. In short, we saw Ramses II and learned that Ramses II has the Holy Grail in his hands. The most surprising thing is, according to Ramses II, he seems to know what happened to us at the previous 5 singularities, Gadatsi said with some surprise. However, Wuming was not surprised. After all, the other party was also considered a god, just like Artoria in the Holy City at this moment. Although Wuming did not ask Artoria, Wuming believed that Artoria must only know about Gadatsi. Then, why did you leave the desert? Is it because of Ramses II's banishment? Wuming hit the nail on the head. Chapter 690. After all, Gadatsi and the other two also needed the Holy Grail. In that case, to Ramses II, Gadotsi and the others were enemies. However, Wuming did not believe that the other party only expelled Gadotsi and the others. There must be other reasons. That was why Wuming asked. Ramses II only let Nidalkals punish us. In fact, it was just a fight. Because we won, Ramses II did not make things difficult for us anymore. He even told us a lot of information. From this point of view, Ramses II's character was not bad. The content of the information was as Wuming expected. The Crusaders used the Holy Grail to summon Ramses II, and then were beaten by Ramses II. He even snatched the Holy Grail and summoned his temple in this huge desert, deepening the collapse of morality in this singularity. And the reason why we were expelled is mainly because of Da Vinci. Matthew looked helplessly at Da Vinci, who was smiling without the slightest self-reflection. Da Vinci personally analyzed how Ramses II came to this singularity and his subsequent actions. Then, Ramses II actually used Da Vinci's intelligence as an excuse to take Da Vinci as his concubine. Gadotsi said halfway, and could not continue. Wuming also knew the reason. It was because this seemingly gentle big sister Da Vinci was actually a man. Yes, a man. Because of Da Vinci's genius idea, after he was summoned, he created a Mona Lisa face puppet spirit base. After that, he stuffed himself into this spirit base and became a woman. But his heart was still a man. Although Da Vinci did not care about gender, he had always cared about art, which was the beauty of the Mona Lisa. I rejected the pharaoh, and then he kicked us out, Da Vinci said with a smile. Although I didn't see it, I can almost imagine the scene at that time. Even Roman could not help but complain. You must have sternly rejected the other party with a serious look on your face. This was the only way to show Da Vinci's vile taste. Isn't that obvious? Mona Lisa is art. Art doesn't get married. But because of that, the other party shamelessly offered the Lion King in the Holy City in the East, Da Vinci said with a smile. This could be considered a blessing in disguise. According to Ramses II, the Lion King is the main culprit behind the accelerated collapse of human nature, Gadotsi said. As expected, Lily's actions also accelerated the collapse of the singularity. Wuming thought to himself after hearing Da Vinci's words. So we decided to meet the Lion King first. Moreover, meeting the Lion King was not only because the other party was also one of the culprits who caused the accelerated collapse of human reason, but also because of Matthew. I'm sorry, Senior. It's all my fault. Matthew apologized to Gadotsi. She had always had a special feeling about the Lion King in the East, so Matthew suggested that they go and take a look. However, this seemingly selfish behavior made Matthew feel deeply uneasy. It's okay, Matthew. After all, I also want to meet the Lion King. Gadotsi didn't think that Matthew was wrong, and Gadotsi also had the intention of going to the Holy City to take a look. Matthew, you want to go to the Holy City to see the Lion King because of Galahad, right? Wuming asked. Yes, Mr. Villo, because according to Mr. Ramses II and Miss Nidalkals, I learned that the knights under the Lion King seem to be knights of the Round Table, Matthew explained. The Lion King who can take in the knights of the Round Table, is his real identity King Arthur? This made Matthew, who knew that the servant attached to him was Galahad, a little concerned. Your guess is right. The Lion King is King Arthur. I just came out of the Holy City and saw him. Wuming's words not only made Matthew sigh, but even Gadotsi, Da Vinci and even Roman, who had not spoken and only listened, also sighed. The reason why Roman didn't speak was that he didn't know much about the situation before Gadotsi and the others left the desert, so he chose to listen. However, the Lion King used the Holy Spear. His body was developed, and the Holy Spear eroded the deified King Arthur. This made Matthew stunned. In other words, the other party is also a deity. Really? Why do we always meet deity-level servants? Roman, who finally spoke, let out a sigh. Do you know about the recent saint selection held in the Holy City? Wuming thought for a moment and looked at the three. Saint selection? It seemed that they didn't know about it. Wuming nodded, then told the three of them what he knew about the saint selection, including the Lion King summoning almost all the knights of the Round Table, making the knights choose to kill each other, and using the Holy Spear to store pure humans to preserve human specimens. and the Knights of the Round Table slaughtering humans who were not chosen. In short, Wuming told Gadotsi and the others all the information he could. This plan is too crazy. Isn't that abandoning almost all humans? Roman was the first to exclaim. The refugees just now were the saint selectors who were almost killed at the Holy City Gate, and the knight who chased the refugees was Tristan. It really is Tristan. Until now, when Wuming said it himself, Gadotsi and the others were completely sure that the knight with the bow was Tristan. Just like what Sira said, the other party is already a goddess, no longer a human. Da Vinci also let out a sigh. The reason why no one raised any doubts about King Arthur being a woman was because they already knew that King Arthur was a woman when they were at the Winterwood City Singularity, so they didn't have any doubts. So, Tachika, Matthew, do you still want to go to the Holy City? Roman's solemn voice came from Gadotsi's wrist. Da Vinci and Wuming also looked at the two of them. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other, then nodded at the same time. Of course we have to go. Since King Arthur has changed, we have to defeat her, Gadotsi said with great emotion. Mr. Galahad entrusted his power to me, so I will also shoulder the responsibility of being King Arthur's subject. I must stop King Arthur. As the successor of the Round Table Galahad's power, Matthew also made a choice. She stood on the opposite side of the king. Wuming also believed that if Galahad came in person, he would definitely make the same choice as Matthew. Since that's the case, let me accompany you back there. Chapter 691. But is this really okay? Gadotsi asked in surprise. After all, Senior Villo, you came out because you have something to do. If you go back because of our capriciousness. Matthew sounded a little embarrassed. After all, if Wuming delayed something important because of accompanying Gadotsi, then Gadotsi and Matthew would feel bad. Then Wuming stretched out his two clenched hands and placed them in front of Gadotsi and Matthew's heads. Immediately after, the two of them were flicked on the head by Wuming's finger that suddenly stretched out. It hurts? Ugh. Gadotsi and Matthew covered their forehead and took 2 steps back. Although even Matthew felt the pain, the strength used by Wuming to flick Gadotsi and Matthew's forehead was different. After all, if he flicked Gadotsi's forehead with the same strength as he flicked Matthew's forehead, then Gadotsi's head would definitely be damaged. You two little idiots, what the hell are you thinking? My purpose is to find you. Why did Wuming come to this singularity? Wasn't it because he felt Gadotsi's summon? When I came to this singularity, I used the sword you gave to Mashu to summon her, but you didn't respond. Gadotsi protested. Mashu also subconsciously moved the seemingly ordinary knight's sword that had been fixed on her waist. Because she was a shielder, she had basically never used it before. Although this knight sword looked ordinary, Wuming had used a special method to fuse the Holy Grail's blade of salvation with this knight sword. Thus, as long as he poured mana into it, the blade of salvation would appear. From the information that Gadotsi now knew, Wuming was likely to have been summoned by the Lion King at this singularity, so he didn't respond to her summon. When you summoned me, I was busy in another world. I just came to this singularity a few days ago. Wuming, who saw Gadotsi's thoughts, immediately explained. Other worlds. Shouldn't other parallel worlds have entered a state of madness at this moment? Roman asked, puzzled. The other worlds I'm talking about are not the world we live in, nor are they parallel worlds of the world we live in. If you want to say it, you can think of it as a different world. After all, whether it was the box court world or several other worlds, for the people of this world, they could be regarded as different worlds. Sigh, that's great. I also want to go to the different worlds to have a look. Gadotsi's eyes showed some intention. But before that, we need to repair our world first. Don't bite off more than you can chew, Da Vinci said, and copied Wuming and flicked Gadotsi's forehead. Ooh, why did Da Vinci flick my forehead when he kissed you? Damn it. In an instant, Gadotsi showed a tearful expression. By the way, I thought that Senior Villo came out to stop Tristan's pursuit of the refugees. Indeed, I didn't come out for these refugees. After all, I didn't know that they were being hunted. I was going to the desert to find the Sun King to retrieve the Holy Grail, and I accidentally saw it, So I stopped Tristan. Wuming responded to Matthew's words. After that, Wuming suddenly remembered something. By the way, about the servant in black, you should have seen the identity of the other party. Wuming was talking about smoky drunk Hassan. If Gadotsi and the other two had been watching, then they must have seen the figure of smoky drunk Hassan. And they must have seen the identity of the other party's servant. It's one of Hassan. Gadotsi nodded. Yes, we also met a Hassan before, 100 Faces Hassan. Matthew suddenly remembered. The reason why they knew so clearly was very simple. The other party has the ability to clone himself. Except for the legendary 100 Faces Hassan who has multiple identities and is proficient in various skills, I really can't think of anyone else. Da Vinci said. You're talking about the men in black who kidnapped Notorious, right? Wuming looked at Gadotsi and the other two helplessly. Gadotsi nodded, and because the other party had multiple numbers, they killed the group of Sphinx that Gadotsi and the other two encountered. Then, Wuming's expression became serious. It's not worth advocating to make a move without figuring out the situation. It's likely to turn allies into enemies. Wuming looked at Gadotsi and Matthew seriously. Wuming's preaching made Gadotsi and Matthew scratch their heads awkwardly. They also realized the seriousness of the problem. After all, in this chaotic singularity, no one could be said to be a good person. Whether it was the desert, the holy city, or the northern mountains, everyone was trying their best to deal with others for their own sake. Therefore, Gadotsi and the others, as outsiders, suddenly intervened and interrupted one party's plan, which undoubtedly made them enemies. It would be fine if the rescued party became the backer of Gadotsi and the others, but the problem was that Gadotsi and the others only saved the subordinates of Ramses II, and the Helios king also expelled them. This time they were in a dilemma. However, from the fact that the Helios king only drove Gadotsi and the others away instead of killing them, it could still be seen that the other party was being merciful. After all, whether it was the pharaoh or the king of gods, Pharaoh, who had defeated the Crusaders, it would be a piece of cake for him to get rid of Gadotsi and the other two. Simply chasing them out was already repaying them for saving his subordinates. But in any case, the result now was that Gadotsi and the others still did not find an ally in this singularity. It was a big failure. By the way, since Hassan can defeat the Sphinx group that gave you a headache, how did you repel him? Wuming had a lot of doubts. After all, Gadotsi also said that dealing with a Sphinx before made them feel difficult. So how did Gadotsi and the others repel Hassan who defeated the Sphinx group? Actually, this is the case, Senior Villo. When the other party saw my shield, he thought I was a knight of the holy city, so Hassan retreated directly. And now, Matthew understood that even if she said no, not many people would believe her. At least, that was what the patterns on her armor and the patterns on the shield in her hand told others. She was a member of the sacred city. The people of the holy city were King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. As the inheritor of Galahad's power, she was naturally regarded as a member of the holy city. However, those people didn't know that even the people of the holy city didn't know that they had such a subservient partner. After listening to Wuming's information about the Lion King for a long time, Gadotsi and Matthew were unlikely to join the holy city, and Gadotsi and the others had also offended Ramses II and Hassan. Therefore, whether it was the Sun King's desert forces, the Lion King's holy city forces, or Hassan's unknown forces in the northern mountains, under the current circumstances, Gadotsi and the others had no way to win over or join them. Are we going to have to fight alone in this singularity? Gadotsi's face was filled with shock and helplessness. Immediately afterward, Roman, who had been silent, spoke. In fact, because the collapse of this singularity is more serious, Chaldea is unlikely to give you much support. Next, Wuming also nodded understandingly. So unless there are other breakthroughs, you really can only fight alone, Tachika. Gadotsi made an Oarzi pose. And just when Gadotsi and Matthew showed a discouraged look, Wuming gave them a chance to live. But if I'm here, then there will be no problem. Chapter 692. Well, you're right. Assassin is super powerful. As long as Assassin is here, everything will be fine. Gadotsi nodded excitedly. After all, Wuming was someone who could fight against the Magic King without losing. How could he not defeat those gods and goddesses? However, Wuming shook his head. Unfortunately, I'm going to disappoint you. Hey, Godatsi was shocked. She felt like she had been slapped in the face, and it was a very painful kind. Assassin, are you not going to help us this time? Godatsi looked at Wuming pitifully, which made Wuming dumbfounded. Did Wyrm-sama join the Lion King's army? Mashu asked in surprise. Because he had joined the Lion King's army, he could no longer help them. Didn't this make sense? Then Wuming knocked Matthew on the head. I didn't mean that. Although I met the Lion King before, I didn't join her, Wuming said slowly as he looked at Matthew, who was acting cute, while covering his forehead. What I mean is, we can form a force. The scene fell into silence. Then exclamations resounded through the sky. Ha! Wuming took down his hands that were covering his ears in advance, and looked calm. Are you surprised? Wuming looked at Godatsi and Matthew, who had the most intense reaction, puzzled. Of course, Matthew sighed. After all, forming a force is a bit unrealistic for us. Godatsi continued Matthew's words. Then, Roman also spoke through Godatsi's communicator. It's not that I don't agree, but let's not talk about the number of people we have. It will take a long time to build a force. This singularity is already in danger, and we can't guarantee when it will be finished. It was not that Roman was pessimistic, but that was the current situation at the moment. Godatsi and the others had been delayed too much in the first 4 singularities. If they didn't have Wuming's help at the 5th singularity, Godatsi and the others would probably die there, let alone the 6th singularity. If they continued to delay, unimaginable things would happen at this singularity. So I don't advocate building a force. Roman's words made Godatsi and Matthew fall into deep thought. Godatsi was thinking about Roman and Wuming's words, while Matthew was thinking about whether it would be bad to delay time because of his own stubbornness. After all, now that they had found the most powerful combat force, they could return to the desert temple, seize the Holy Grail, and end this singularity. At this time Da Vinci, who had been silent all this time, spoke. Although Roman's words make sense, I think Sira's words can also be considered. Godatsi and Matthew looked at Da Vinci. If we have our own force, it will be more convenient to do things, isn't it, Roman? But Roman wanted to refute, but Da Vinci interrupted him. If we don't go to the holy city, it will inevitably become a knot in Matthew's heart. I think you don't want to see Matthew lose something in his heart, Roman. Roman was silent. Godatsi and Wuming might not know, but as an old employee of Chaldea, Da Vinci was very clear. Matthew could be said to be Roman's daughter, in another way, because Matthew grew up with Matthew's attending physician Roman. Sigh. Okay. Roman sighed and compromised. But we are completely understaffed. We can't just rely on the 4 of you to form a force. Roman's tone was full of melancholy. Regarding this problem, I think Sira should have a countermeasure. Da Vinci looked at Wuming with a smile. Wuming nodded as a matter of course. Since I made this suggestion, I naturally have a way. Then Wuming looked at Da Vinci and emphasized. For this body, call me Villo. Although Wuming was both Sira and a Villo, this spiritual base was summoned as a Villo, so it was better to call him Villo. Yes, then Villo, do you have any good ideas? Da Vinci affectionately called out Wuming's name. Deliberately ignoring Da Vinci's bad taste, Wuming smiled. It's very simple. Since we don't have enough people, then we can just call for help. Call for help? Godatsi was confused. Why did it sound like a fight between hooligans? Then where do we call for help? Matthew raised a question. After all, there were currently 3 forces at this singularity, and they couldn't rope in any of them for the time being. Of course it's from another world. Wuming's words made Godatsi and Matthew shout in surprise. Another world. Roman, who was among Da Vinci and Chaldea, had a thoughtful look. It's impossible to explain it clearly. Why don't I show you? Follow me, Wuming said as he walked in a certain direction. Godatsi and Matthew looked at each other, then looked at Da Vinci, who nodded. You guys go first. My beloved car is still over there. Nodding, Godatsi and Matthew followed Wuming. After walking for a while, Wuming stopped. We're here. Godatsi and Matthew heard Wuming's words and looked around. There's nothing? Godatsi was puzzled. Senior Villo, what do you want us to see? Matthew, who was also puzzled, also asked. The reason why Godatsi and Matthew asked this question was because the place where Wuming took them was still a wasteland, which was no different from where they were before. Wuming was not in a hurry as he said patiently, take a closer look. Godatsi and Matthew obediently listened to Wuming's words as they took 2 steps forward. This is. Godatsi's pupils suddenly shrank. The ground in front of them seemed to be neatly dug by a cube-shaped object, and a huge square pit appeared in front of Godatsi. Senior Villo, this is? Matthew turned to look at Wuming. I arrived here before, and when I arrived, I encountered a group of starving refugees. This is the trace I made to trap them. That's right, the place where Wuming took Godatsi and Matthew to was the place where Wuming first arrived. Just, Godatsi and Matthew clicked their tongues. Wuming's move was already very powerful in their opinion. Then why did you bring us here? Godatsi was puzzled. Was it just to show off? But that was impossible. Although they had only known each other for a short time, Godatsi thought that the Wuming she knew was not a person who liked to show off. The reason why I brought you here is because I'm going to use this place as a base. Base. Chapter 693. Yes, it's a base. After all, if you want to establish your own force, how can you do it without a base? Ramses II had the Great Shrine, Artoria also had the new holy city, and even the Hassans in the north had intricate mountains as cover. Therefore, establishing a base was a very important thing for a force. Although I don't think we'll be able to use it. Wuming muttered. Assassin, what did you say? I didn't hear you clearly. Godatsi heard Wuming's muttering and asked curiously. It's okay, by the way, where did Da Vinci go? Wuming quickly changed the topic. Da Vinci went to find the car she made, Godatsi replied. Made the car. This made Wuming confused. Could Da Vinci still make the car in this situation? Immediately, Matthew explained. Yes, Senior Villo, we got a lot of materials from the shrine in the desert, including some wood, and Da Vinci used the wood to make 2 working wooden cars. They left the desert in Da Vinci's car. After leaving the desert, Da Vinci noticed that there was a situation ahead, so he temporarily hid the car and walked with Godatsi and Matthew to check the situation. So when Wuming saw Godatsi and the other 2, there was no car around them. However, Wuming didn't know what to say about Da Vinci, making a car with only wood. He could only say that Da Vinci was worthy of being called a genius. Don't worry about Da Vinci, assassin. How are you going to call helpers from the other world? Is it in the form of heroic spirit summoning? Godatsi showed a strong desire for knowledge. Almost. Wuming nodded. Wuming was preparing to summon the helpers he needed in the form of a servant. Then Wuming walked in front of Godatsi and Matthew. Both of you step back. I'm going to start the summoning ritual. Seeing how serious Wuming was, Godatsi and Matthew couldn't help but gulp and step back. Wuming took a deep breath and exhaled. Buzz. With a humming sound, several golden ripples spread out around Wuming. Along with the appearance of the golden ripples, silver-white chains emerged from Wuming's golden ripples. These were all pseudo-heaven locks that Wuming had prepared to use as materials for the summoning array. With Wuming's current ability, it was a piece of cake for him to create a pseudo-heaven lock using advanced item creation. Whoosh! The chains swayed and made a clattering sound. One by one, the chains formed a variety of shapes above the pit in front of Wuming. There were arcs, right angles, straight lines, curves, all sorts of arcs, lines, and angles were pieced together by silence will as if they were building blocks. Gradually, countless pseudo-heaven locks connected one after another, forming a huge magic array. Finally, 2 pseudo-heaven locks extended from the magic array and came in front of Wuming. I hope it works, Wuming said, holding the 2 pseudo-heaven locks with both hands. Buzz. Immediately afterward, Wuming injected the magic power in his body into the 2 pseudo-heaven locks, and blue magic flames visible to the naked eye appeared on the 2 pseudo-heaven locks. And these two pseudo-heaven locks were connected to the magic array constructed by a large number of pseudo-heaven locks, so Wuming's magic power actually flowed into the magic array. Wuming continued to inject magic power, and the entire magic array composed of pseudo-heaven locks burned. The burning of the huge magic power caused the surrounding magic power to become restless. The atmosphere also became unstable, and it began to flow violently. In short, it produced some weak hurricanes in the surroundings. "Senior, please be careful," Matthew said solemnly, while coming in front of Gadotsi and blocking in front of her with his shield. Although Matthew also believed that Wuming would not harm them, as the follower of his senior, Gadotsi, Matthew also had to do a good job of protecting her. At the same time, Roman's voice suddenly came from the communicator on Gadotsi's wrist. "Wah, what are you doing over there?" "Doctor? What's wrong?" Gadotsi raised her wrist to her chest and asked puzzledly. "Chaldea's instrument shows that there is a fiercely burning magic power source next to you, and its magic power is comparable to the magic power consumed by multiple first-class servants to release their noble phantoms. It's still going up. Z. Before Roman finished speaking, the communication between Chaldea and Gadotsi was disconnected. "Hello? Hello? Doctor? Doctor? Are you still there, doctor?" Gadotsi shouted to her bracelet. "Senior, it may be that Villo's magic array temporarily disrupted the surrounding magic power, causing us to be unable to receive Chaldea's magic signal." Matthew held his shield in front of Gadotsi, looked back at Gadotsi, and explained to Gadotsi, "Hey, is it that serious?" Gadotsi said and looked at Wuming, who was constantly instilling magic power into the magic array composed by the pseudo-heaven lock. What kind of existence was summoned with so much magic power? That thought appeared in Gadotsi's mind. Matthew was shocked by Wuming's current behavior, but the most important thing for her now was to protect her master, Senpai. "However, one thing is certain, Senpai, we may have a very powerful helper this time." On Wuming's side, Wuming frowned and continued to instill magic power into the magic array. Wuming's main body's magic power was indeed boundless, and the magic power of Wuming's servant's body was much more than ordinary first-class servants. However, Wuming's servant's body was not his main body after all. There was a lot of magic power, but there would eventually be a limit to it. If the magic power of Wuming's servant's body was exhausted, then Wuming would comply with the rule that the servant has no magic power and cannot maintain the manifestation, and withdraw. Now Wuming's huge magic power had been consumed by 2/3. Wuming decided that if half of the remaining 1/3 of magic power couldn't summon what Wuming wanted, then Wuming would give up. After all, Wuming himself had to leave a guaranteed amount of magic power, then transfer it in one breath. Wuming gritted his teeth, divided the remaining 1/3 of magic power in his body into 2 parts, and extracted one part of the magic power, and instilled it into the pseudo-heaven lock. Boom! The 2 pseudo-heavenly locks that Wuming was holding were broken, because there was too much magic power poured in an instant. And these 2 pseudo-heaven locks were also fake. The quality was not as good as the real thing, so they were completely shattered and turned into pure magic power. However, it didn't matter even if these 2 transmission links were broken because the magic power that had been formed was still connected to the magic array. Even the magic power generated after the pseudo-heaven lock was absorbed and used as a burn for the magic array. And just when this huge amount of magic power was poured into the magic array finally lit up. Chapter 694. The light of the magic circle was like the sun, and Gadotsi couldn't help but close her eyes, cover her eyes with her hands, and curl up behind Matthew. Although Matthew, as a servant, was much better than Gadotsi, she couldn't help but shrink behind her shield, not daring to see what was happening in front of her. However, whether it was Gadotsi or Matthew, both of them had the same thought in their hearts, that was, Wuming succeeded. Gradually, the light of the magic circle gradually dissipated, and the pseudo-heavenly lock that constituted the magic circle also seemed to have lost its light and shattered all of a sudden. Gadotsi and Matthew, who heard the sound, couldn't help but poke their heads out from behind the shield, looking forward curiously. The 2 of them didn't return to their senses for a long time. In the sky directly in front of the magic circle composed of the pseudo-heavenly lock, there was a behemoth floating at this moment. The floating island was like a giant tree floating silently in the air. The blood-red roots that were filled with the smell of blood floated in the air like a turf. Instead of leaves, there was a dazzling blue-green crystal. However, this guy was not a tree, but a fantasy species that could move freely and looked like a floating tree. Abenheim. However, its huge size, coupled with the height of the floating island, gave people the impression that it was a mountain range rooted in the earth. If it weren't for Gadotsi and Matthew being close to it, they would have thought that the floating island was a mountain. Anyway, the diameter of the floating island was completely immeasurable by the eyes of Gadotsi and Matthew. Both of them even thought that the entire barren land around them was occupied by this floating island. However, the point was not here. What attracted Gadotsi and Matthew was the beautiful figures with wings that flew out of the leaves of the blue crystal. Maybe they were real angels. These angels were all in the shape of young girls, and they all had a peerless appearance. However, the strange thing was that these angels were all wearing sleeveless tops, panties with ribbons and pendants, and asymmetrical pants. Even their shoes and socks were asymmetrical. Although they were wearing clothes that didn't match, the golden ratio bodies of the angel girls were still perfectly displayed. Gadotsi felt that these angels already had bodies and faces that were comparable to Cleopatra, and even Maeve, who were known for their beauty. Complex magic circles that looked like the halos of angels were placed above the heads of the angels. Perhaps the pair of white pigeon-like wings was the only thing the angels had in common. The angels flew out of the floating island and came to the position where the magic circle was originally formed by the pseudo-heaven lock. They spread their wings and hovered in the air with their eyes closed. Matthew had no idea how many angels there were in the sky, but in Matthew's opinion, the number of thousands had long exceeded the threshold. Perhaps it was more appropriate to say that there were tens of thousands of them. Among them, a beautiful green-haired girl who was closest to Wyrm at the very front, who seemed to be the leader, slowly opened her eyes. Those eyes of hers, which looked like swords and shields crossing each other, made Gadotsi instantly see the contradictory feeling of death and protection. And as if it had caused a chain reaction, the moment the green-haired girl opened her eyes, all the angels behind her opened their eyes one after another. Countless eyes of swords and shields crossing each other were reflected in Gadotsi's eyes. This time, Gadotsi found another common point among the angels. All members of the Skywing race pay respects to the Lord. The green-haired girl opened her mouth and spread her wings as much as she could toward Wyrm and lowered her head slightly. Once again, like a chain reaction, all the Skywings behind the green-haired girl said in unison, "Pay respects to the Lord." Countless pairs of wings spread out in the sky, and the countless wings were like a canopy that slightly covered the floating island behind them. The shattered pseudo-celestial shackles turned into motes of magical light that dotted the angels, adding a layer of mystery to the angels. Right after that, the floating island behind the angels seemed to come to life, the blue crystals all over it shaking like a window, reflecting the sun's rays. Wyrm, who was not far in front of Gadotsi and Matthew, nodded in satisfaction. This gamble, which he had taken at the risk of exhausting his mana and losing his spirit base, had paid off. Silent Cry had successfully summoned Abentheim in his servant form, as well as all the Skywing species that numbered in the tens of thousands. However, it was reasonable to say that Wyrm should not be able to use the dependence of one of the 12 avatars, which meant that Wyrm should not be able to summon the Skywings. Although Wyrm was currently in his servant form, it did not mean that he was completely a servant. Before becoming a servant Vilothoranced, he was still a root dragon. Wyrm had channeled part of the 12 avatars' abilities into the spirit base, but Wyrm was afraid that he would attract Gidea's attention if he were too ostentatious. Gaia should also be in a heavily injured state at this moment, and Silent Wonder had confirmed that this singularity was not directly caused by the other party, but indirectly. In other words, the other party did not actually have control over this singularity. However, Wyrm could not guarantee that the other party would not come after him directly. Wyrm, who had yet to find his main body, did not dare to be so ostentatious. Therefore, Wyrm channeled the weakened versions of the 12 avatars into the spirit base, but the price was that their power was greatly reduced, and each ability could only be used once. Wu Ming was able to summon the Skywing race and Abendheim from another world as his servant by using his one-use dependent to transform himself into a holy relic. As for why he summoned them in their servant form, it was because if they died in this world as servants, their main body in the other world would not die. Although the Skywings loved to fight and were not afraid of death, Silent Wonder did not want anything to happen to the children that Artesio had entrusted to him. Secondly, summoning them in their servant form was already the limit for Wu Ming. If he wanted to summon their main body in the other world, then Wu Ming would need some time to prepare. But what they lacked at the moment was time, so Wu Ming directly summoned the Skywings in their servant form. In fact, Wu Ming also wanted to summon Athena, Lancelot, and the others from the God-Slayer world, as well as the god of disobedience who had signed a contract with him. But it seemed that the ability that Wu Ming injected into the spirit base was a little too weak, and it could only summon people from one world at a time. What Wu Ming needed now was more people, so Wu Ming chose the Skywings, which had more people, instead of the god of disobedience, which only had a few people. In short, Gadotsi and the others were no longer short of people, and the nearly 10,000 Skywings were enough. Wu Ming turned his head and looked at the two people behind him. Gadotsi and Matthew were now in a state of shock. How is it? These people are enough, right? Wu Ming asked with a smile. Chapter 695. Gadotsi and Matthew were speechless. All they could do was nod their heads. Wu Ming waved his hand at the Skywing species, indicating that there was no need for them to continue bowing. Whoosh! All the Skywings retracted their wings, which had been spread to the maximum extent, leaving only enough for them to fly. At the same time, they raised their slightly lowered heads. The canopy formed by their wings disappeared, and was replaced by beautiful figures. Even so, none of the Skywings acted alone. They all hovered in the air like a well-organized army, waiting for Wu Ming's order to turn into a sharp blade and pierce the enemy's heart. Sensing the shock and threat that the Skywings brought, Gadotsi and Matthew believed that these young ladies had the ability to do so. And that was indeed the case. Even Wu Ming had to admit it. Arthas was truly a war god. The race he created completely embodied the characteristics of a warrior race. When they got serious, they were all qualified soldiers. Be it in terms of strength or their ability to listen to commands, the Skywings were definitely an army that all ambitious individuals would fight to have. Even the youngest and most lively, Gopril, was rather obedient. She was still hovering behind Azrael, though she would occasionally throw flirtatious glances at Wu Ming, which Wu Ming noticed. No, it should be said that Gopril was doing it for Wu Ming to see. Assassin! Are these your subordinates? Are you so elegant in another world? Gadotsi, who had finally reacted, excitedly tugged at Wu Ming's armored arm. Because Wu Ming was wearing armor, there was no need for her to tug at his sleeves. However, Azrael, who was closest to Wu Ming, narrowed her eyes and looked at Gadotsi with hostility. The reason why the Skywings were known as a race of lunatics was that they did not consider the consequences. The Skywings were a bunch of people who would humiliate their masters. Even if they could not beat them, they would still mercilessly attack them. To Azrael, Gadotsi's rude behavior was humiliating her mistress and had crossed her bottom line. In an instant, Azrael appeared beside Gadotsi and slashed her magic scythe at Gadotsi. The entire process took less than a second. Clang! The scythe slammed into a shield engraved with a lion and a cross, causing Gadotsi to cover her ears. Ugh! Matthew, who was holding the shield, couldn't help but groan. Because of Azrael's strength, Matthew's feet had sunk deep into the ground. Matthew struggled to press his shield against Azrael's attack. Stand down, Azrael. They're my friends. Wu Ming looked at Azrael with some displeasure. He really did not expect Azrael to be so impulsive as to charge forward with her scythe. Although even if Matthew did not react to Azrael's attack, with Wu Ming here, Gadotsi would not be hurt. Azrael's behavior was still a little too much. Moreover, to kill off an ally as soon as she appeared was a little too much. My apologies, my lord. Azrael immediately cancelled her magic scythe and floated to Wu Ming's side with an apologetic look. Even Azriel felt so guilty that she did not even have any quirky words. Are you all right, Tachika, Matthew? Wuming looked at Gadotsi and Matthew with concern. I'm fine. It's just that the impact just now was a little loud. Gadotsi helplessly pinched her ears. She felt that if the sound was a little louder, she would go deaf. I'm fine too, Vilo-senpai. As a subservient and a shield-bearer, Matthew's physical fitness was still good. At least, Matthew was able to withstand the blow just now. After that, Matthew showed a look of disappointment. I just didn't expect that Vilo-senpai's subordinates in the other world were so powerful. Although Matthew was indeed a noob, she had grown a lot after going through 5 singularities. Now she could be regarded as a second-rate top servant. But she still felt that Azriel's attack was a little difficult. Matthew was sure that if Azriel attacked twice more, his shield would be gone. In other words, Azriel had at least the strength of a first-rate servant. However, he still couldn't protect his senpai well. Thinking of this, Matthew sighed in disappointment. It's just that Azriel is one of the strongest skywing species. If it were other ordinary skywing species, it wouldn't be so exaggerated. Wuming comforted Matthew. Yes, Azriel was able to knock Mashu's shield out of her hands in 3 attacks, while the other skywings would only need 5, 6, or even 7 or 8 attacks to knock Mashu's shield out of her hands. Indeed, it wasn't that exaggerated. Then Wuming looked at Azriel. He was ready to punish her. What's the matter, Azriel? You shouldn't be an impulsive person, right? Wuming looked at Azriel, puzzled. Although he said that he was going to punish her, Wuming was not a bad person, so he was just asking. As the first prototype of the skywing species, Azriel was originally the leader of the skywing species when Arthas was not around. Her personality was also not as well as irritable as the other skywing species, so how could she suddenly attack over such a small matter? It was not just Wuming who understood this. Azriel naturally understood this as well, which was why she felt guilty about her actions. As the commander of the skywing species, not being able to control her emotions well was a failure. Azriel understood this very well. However, the skywing species were a warlike, easily irritable, and easily excited race, so Azriel's impulsiveness was nothing. Whether it was Arthas, Wuming, or even Azriel herself, no one had stipulated that Azriel should go against her nature. After all, it would be too much to force someone to go against their nature. However, as the commander of the skywing species, Azriel really should not have been so impulsive. After all, Azriel was a senior who had lived for more than 10,000 years. How could she be so impulsive like a young brat? Moreover, any skywing species could tell that Gadotsi and Wuming had a good relationship. Yet Azriel still attacked when Gadotsi was recklessly tugging at Wuming. Master, I don't know what's going on either. I feel like I'm very impulsive now, but it seems that at the cost of this, my various ability values have increased quite a bit. Meow. Azriel, who had just attacked, was very sure that her strength, speed, and even magic capacity had increased quite a bit. Wuming was taken aback, and he had some guesses in his mind. Then, Wuming looked at Azriel attentively, trying to see something. In the end, he really did see something. So that's how it is. Chapter 696. So that's how it is. Wuming nodded. Assassin, did you see anything? Gadotsi asked curiously. Gudazi's behavior made Wuming couldn't help but laugh. After all, she had just experienced a life and death situation. Even after walking through the gates of hell, she could still act like nothing had happened. Could it be said that Gadotsi had a good mentality, or that Gadotsi had a big heart? Wuming shook his head and explained to Gadotsi. I saw Azriel's servant attribute. Servant attribute. Gadotsi and Matthew could not help but exclaim. Yes. Wuming nodded and looked at Gadotsi and Matthew. Matthew, let's not talk about it for now. I think that as a master, you should understand that a master can check the ability value and attributes of their own servants. Wuming had made it very clear, and Gadotsi now understood. It must be known that Wuming had summoned this angel, named Azriel, in the form of a servant, and as a summoned servant, she naturally had a master. So who was Azriel's master? It was undoubtedly Wuming in front of Gudatsi. Therefore, Wuming could see the other party's ability value. Azriel was summoned as a berserker, so she has the berserk skill to sacrifice her rationality in exchange for an increase in ability value. However, because she was not a regular heroic spirit, Azriel did not lose her rationality, but it was not that she was not completely affected. Azriel just became a little impulsive. That was the reason why Azriel had suddenly become violent. Not only that, but the other Skywing species were all summoned as berserkers, Wuming said, looking at the Skywing species floating in the air. Unlike a senior like Azriel, many of the other Skywings had been deeply affected by the berserk effect. If one were to look carefully, they would discover that many Skywings had a hint of irritation in their eyes as they crossed their swords and shields. They had already been floating in the air for a while, and they had already developed quite a bit of arrogance, as if they were already impatient. However, his loyal heart still suppressed the negative effects of berserk. Sure enough, summoning all of them in such a hurry has created a drawback, Wuming said with some self-reproach. If Wuming was given enough time, he could guarantee that he could summon the Skywing breeds that were not affected by their class at all, unlike now, where the majority of the Skywing breeds he summoned were filled with arrogance. Fortunately, the strength of the Skywings was not suppressed. Instead, it was boosted by the berserk state. Generally speaking, after a heroic spirit descended in the form of a servant, its strength would be more or less weakened. After all, it was not its main body. However, the Skywing breeds were not heroic spirits, and Wuming had summoned them using his kin as a holy relic. For various reasons, the summoned Skywing breeds were not weakened at all, and all of them were summoned with their strength boosted by the berserk state. It feels so awesome. Gudatsi looked at Wuming like a fangirl. Even Matthew kept nodding his little head to express his admiration for this senior Villo. At this moment, the sound of a car could be heard by Wuming, Gudatsi, and Matthew. The sound of a car? Wuming was taken aback. Could it be that Da Vinci had driven over? Ah, it's Da Vinci's car. Matthew, who had already begun to observe, exclaimed. Wuming looked in the direction Matthew was looking, and Wuming saw a simple convertible car made completely of wood driving over. The person sitting in the driver's seat was the familiar face of Mona Lisa. Wuming looked speechlessly at the small car under Da Vinci. It was completely made of wood. Fortunately, this car is powered by magic. Wuming sighed. Otherwise, Da Vinci would not be a genius but a god. If this car was not powered by magic but by gasoline, Wuming would really have to bow down to Da Vinci, who had only used a few pieces of wood to build a modern car. This was as shocking as an ordinary high school student building a nuclear bomb in an ordinary laboratory. Hey, your genius Da Vinci is here. Da Vinci drove the car while greeting Wuming and the others who had already approached. Looking at the wooden car with a braking system better than any modern car, Wuming could only smile awkwardly. If Da Vinci was a businessman in modern times, he would definitely make a lot of money. Gudatsi and Matthew nodded silently when they heard this sentence. When Da Vinci used wood to build this car in a very short time, we also had the same idea. After all, the things born from this guy's hands could completely replace modern products with the same performance. However, even so, Wuming always felt that even if Da Vinci became a businessman, others would definitely call him a black-hearted businessman. There was no other reason. It was just intuition. Oh, I was just wondering why there was suddenly a large amount of magic fluctuations here. It turns out that someone summoned a servant here. As a genius, Da Vinci saw the form of the Skywing species floating in the sky, including Azriel, at a glance. There were tens of thousands of angels here, all of them were servants, and they were not weak ones. Is it something that Villo did personally? It's really surprising. There are so many servants here. Are you the master of all of them? Da Vinci said jokingly, but Gudatsi and Matthew now reacted and screamed. Hey, hey, hey! That's right. These are all servants summoned by Assassin Villo. Alone and Assassin Villo just said that she was their master. Doesn't that mean that these tens of thousands of strong servants are all supplied by Assassin Villo, alone? How much magic does that require? Is Assassin Villo the reincarnation of the Holy Grail? You guys think too highly of me. Even I can't provide magic for tens of thousands of first-class servants at the same time. Wyrm, who understood why Gadotsi and Matthew were screaming, helplessly smiled and shook his head. Because I used a special method to summon them, so I only have a master-slave relationship with them. Whether it's the magic to maintain the present world, or the magic to fight, they provide it all themselves. The magic I used before is stored in their bodies. What do you think Wyrm used so much magic for? How could it be used just for summoning? The magic was distributed to the tens of thousands of Skywings and Abendheim. So that's how it is. Gadotsi and Matthew breathed a sigh of relief. But doesn't that mean that Villo's magic is comparable to tens of thousands of servants? Da Vinci tilted his head and asked curiously. Hey, 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 hey! Gadotsi and Matthew screamed. Chapter 697. A few minutes later, Gadotsi and Matthew calmed down. Yes, what else could they do but calm down? Hugging Wyrm's thigh and shouting, "Big boss, please take me along?" In short, whether it was Gadotsi, Matthew, or Da Vinci, after experiencing this incident, they clearly realized the horror of Wyrm's EX-level magic attribute. No wonder Assassin made a holy grail for him. This was from Gadotsi. Although the holy grail that Wyrm created back then was only used to provide mana, that was already very shocking, alright. In addition to the shock of Wyrm's magic attribute, Gadotsi also reconnected with Chaldea. Gadotsi and Matthew told Roman the reason for the disconnection, and the reason why nearly 10,000 servants appeared. Then, a scream comparable to Gadotsi and Matthew came from Gadotsi's bracelet communicator. What? Gadotsi disdainfully stretched her arm as far away as possible. If she could, she really wanted to throw away the communicator that was used to contact Roman, because Dr. Roman was really too noisy. In the past few months, Roman's mood has been fluctuating a lot. He always likes to shout. As a doctor, Roman knew that it was not good for his health. But he couldn't help it. Since he met Wyrm, his heart was often stimulated. How is this possible? Villo is now in the servant state. Let's not talk about the limitations of summoning servants from another world. Just to maintain the existence of nearly 10,000 servants, even Crowncaster can't provide the magic needed in an instant. Roman, who was in Chaldea, looked at the number of servants displayed on the big screen. He was completely crazy. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind. This was way too freakish. Hey, doctor. How do you know that Solomon can't come up with so much magic? Gadotsi expressed doubts about Roman's words. Although they only met once in the fifth singularity, how did the doctor know that Solomon's magic was not comparable to Wyrm's? Clang. The sound of someone falling from the chair came from Gadotsi's bracelet communicator. Da Vinci, who had already imagined Roman's embarrassing appearance, covered his mouth and laughed. That's what I told Roman when I went to Chaldea. Wyrm instantly mediated for Roman. No. That's right, when Wyrm came to Chaldea, he told me that Solomon's magic is not as good as mine. In the control room of Chaldea, Roman helplessly got up from the ground and sat again. By the way, now that we have the manpower, what are you going to do next? Patting his face, Roman forced himself to be alert. On Gadotsi's side, after hearing Roman's words, everyone looked at Wyrm. After meeting Wyrm, Gadotsi and Matthew had already regarded Wyrm as their backbone. As for Da Vinci, she just thought it was fun and went along with Gadotsi and Matthew. I originally wanted to summon Azrael and the others and build a base here. Wyrm glanced at Azrael, who had returned to the Skywings, and then pointed to the huge pit beside him. But I've successfully summoned Abendheim. Since that's the case, there's no need to build a base. Because Wyrm had never tried to summon an otherworld's dependent in the form of a full moon, he was not confident. Then Wyrm took a gamble. Not only did he successfully summon the Skywing servant clones, but he also summoned Abendheim's servant clones. Because they were servant clones, Wyrm did not need to worry about the Skywings and Abendheim's situation in their own world. This was because what their clones experienced in this singularity only happened in an instant to their main bodies. Assassin, do you mean Abendheim, the giant tree floating in the air? Gadotsi pointed at the giant tree with blue crystal-like leaves and red trunks, which had already risen quite a bit and were floating in the air. It's Abendheim, but it's not a tree. It's a real fantasy breed. Fantasy breed? Roman exclaimed from Gadotsi's wristband communicator. What's that? Gadotsi did not know. It's a general term for creatures recorded in myths and legacies all over the world. Their existence itself is mysterious. Even in the magic world, they are rarely discovered, Da Vinci explained. Senpai, fantasy breed is simply an extinct creature that no longer exists in our world. The evil dragon Fafnir we encountered in France can be classified as a fantasy breed. In order to make Gadotsi understand better, Mashu, who was in charge of supplementing, gave an example. In other words, fantasy breeds are actually very rare creatures. Gadotsi felt that she understood. Something like that. Abendheim is a little different from the fantasy breeds of this world, but it's not much different. So there's no need to know too much about it. You just need to know that Abent is also a powerful servant, Wuming concluded. Wuming then continued. Abent was summoned as a rider, but Abent is actually an existence similar to a mount. Osriel and the others usually live on Abent's body. That's interesting. Gadotsi was intrigued by Wuming's words. You can visit it whenever you want, but we need to make a plan now. Wuming's words made Gadotsi nod quickly. Because Abent itself is a flying fortress, and Osriel and the others are also a powerful combat race, the Skywing species. So there's no problem with manpower and combat power. Skywing species? Matthew looked at the angels still floating in the sky, but he did not underestimate them. Osriel's previous attack was still fresh in Mashu's memory. I really couldn't tell that these cute girls are a combat race. Da Vinci smiled as he evaluated the Skywing species. I'll accept Da Vinci's praise for my Skywing species. Now I'll talk about my plan. Wuming became serious. Let's not worry about the mountain folk in the northern mountains for now. As a new force, the Lion King and the Sun King on the east and west will definitely be on guard. And I don't think they want to have another enemy for no reason. So our new force will send an ambassador to negotiate with the Lion King and the Sun King. In this way, so we can see the Lion King legitimately. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.